Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hazima Mozam, and I welcome you all to the online workshop on scientific writing. This workshop is jointly organized by Comstech in collaboration with the International Center for Chemical and Biological Sciences and Send Innovation Research and Education Network. This workshop will be delivered by a renowned expert, Professor Dr. Rafat Ali Siddiqui. But before starting this workshop, I would request Mr. Bilal for the recitation of Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. This workshop comprises of extensive exercises, tutorials, and discussion sessions. In order to invite and welcome our guest speaker today, I would request Professor Dr. Farzana Shaheen to welcome and introduce our guest speaker for today.
Thank you very much, Hazima, for inviting me. On behalf of Comstech and International Center for Chemical and Biological Sciences, University of Karachi, I welcome you all to this online workshop on scientific writing. And this workshop will be conducted by Professor Dr. Rafat Ali Siddiqui. I'm very pleased to introduce you with Dr. Siddiqui. Dr. Rafat Siddiqui has earned his PhD in 1988 from the Australian National University, Australia, under the supervision of Professor John William, who is famous for his research on the pentose phosphate pathway. He immigrated to America in 1989, where he started his research work in bone marrow transplant research laboratory at Methodist Hospital in 1993, where he established his independent research laboratory in 1999. At present, he is a senior investigator and the director of the Cellular Biochemistry Research Laboratory, and he is also serving as adjunct professor in the Department of Biology, Indiana University. During the course of his scientific career, he has developed broad expertise in the life science research area, and his research is focused to investigate how dietary fats impact diseases, particularly cardiovascular and cancer disease. He has developed a very successful research program at the Methodist Research Institute in the area of molecular nutrition. His current research interests include studies of pulmonary angiogenesis by protein and lipid angiogenic factors and the role of omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols on cellular processes in cancer and cardiovascular disease. Research in the cancer area also includes the investigation of the effect of omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols on cancer growth inhibition in various in vivo and in vitro cancer models. Recent research is focused on the identification of nutritional compounds for the inhibition of muscle wasting in an atrophic condition often associated with the cancer, inflammation, AIDS, and other chronic diseases. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Rafat Siddiqui for his lecture in this online workshop. Thank you, Doctor.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you, Dr. Shaheen, for your very kind and very long introduction. Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and especially I love to conduct this scientific writing workshop. Just 1 second. Well, the reason why we're doing this workshop, basically, like to show you how to write your thesis, your research papers, and how to present your work, right? And it's very essential because realize the things, especially in countries like Pakistan, Middle East, they do excellent job. They do hard work, they do all research and all that. But when they present, they write. Actually, their importance of their work diminishes because the presentation is really poor. Sometimes they cannot express clearly. It's just like an example that you have a very expensive present, you want to give it to somebody, you read that paper in a newspaper, give it to somebody, people will think, oh, maybe it's a piece of junk, you will not realize the importance of that gift, right? But if you have a very cheap gift, but you package it brilliantly, in a nice package with writing papers and put some flower on it and all that, give it to somebody who will, doesn't give it openly, get impressed. You say, oh, it's a very nice present, inside maybe something very cheap, but still, if that person would value that gift more than an expensive gift that in a piece of newspaper. So it's same thing as for your research, right? You do excellent research, work hard. So when you package it, you will be people try to put in a newspaper and try to give it to somebody. That it's up to you to understand what's inside and the importance what's inside the newspaper or in the package, right? But if you present it right, and then if work you want to show it to people, the importance of your work, then you have to really write it appropriately, right? So the writing, everybody knows how to write. People probably speak better than me, right? They can probably write. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I have a habit of walking and talking. So online, yeah. Okay, I did not realize. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so so the writing is not just simply, what I was trying to say is that people probably speak better than me, write better than me, but the scientific writing, there are certain rules and regulations and certain way you would like to present your work, right? So we'll go some of those exercises. So scientific writing. So what makes this writing different, scientific writing different to any other kind of writing? Get any suggestion? Well, the thing is that scientific writing, I just have this to just to show you that the day you enroll for your PhD, the only thing in your brain is that you have to write your thesis, right? So everybody think about writing their thesis. So, it is very important because this is going to be representing your work, your 4 or 5 years of work. In that case, you constantly thinking about writing, but you have to prepare yourself, right? Look, the human brain is amazing, right? It functions like 24/7 from the day you are born, and it only stops when you sit down to do some writing, right? Have you experienced that? Like you want to write something, you sit down and then you say nothing is coming, right? You don't know how to start and how to finish, what to write. So it happens to everybody, even you are expert, it happens, right? But the thing is that more you practice, more you understand how to write, better you can prepare yourself, right? So, you have to write to express, not to impress people, right? You don't have to, especially in scientific writing, oh, we did not share this screen, sorry. Okay. No, I did not actually share. Okay, I apologize to people who are online because I forgot to share my screen. So you haven't missed anything. I was talking about scientific writing, and what makes scientific writing different to writing is that in scientific writing, there are two important things. One is clarity and precision. Whenever you write any sentence, you write your thesis or abstract, you have to really look if the sentence is clear. Okay, And we'll go through some example what the clarity means and precision. Precision means you were saying exactly what you mean to say, not that what other people going to interpret. Okay, you can say something and it can be interpreted in different ways, right? Yeah, here's some funny examples, right? For example, it says toilet only for disabled, elderly, pregnant children, right? Well, is it clear? When okay, so what is missing here? No, but this can be one thing, but comma is not going to make it clear, right? If it says like in a toilet only for disabled, elderly, pregnant, or children, right? So or is missing, then it will make, so just missing one word, it will, people understand what it means, but it's not very clear, right? Same as like best sausage supper in St. Louis, eat and come and eat, Pastor Thomas Wrestler, right? Again, the message is come and eat, the pastor, right? So, but that's not the message, right? So what is missing here? No, just simply like come and eat with, Pastor Thomas, come and eat with. So if you just put in the meanings a little bit, clear that what exactly it means. There are only like, a small few things which can make things a lot clearer. And this is just a general English writing, but when you're talking about scientific writing, you have to go one step further to make sure that what you're writing is exactly what it means. For example, there is an example here, and you probably heard this before, I've seen this before. It said, woman without her man is nothing, right? So what does it mean? What message you are getting from this sentence? I mean, is it clear? I mean, right? Maybe all the women are upset here, I think. Yes. So, but then whoever is wrote, maybe he doesn't mean that, right? But whoever is writing, they have certain image or getting certain message, right? The person may not mean that, right? But the person who wrote it may not mean that, but wrote in a way that it means something different, right? So whose fault it is? The person who's writing, right? But usually people expect that you say something and you expect the other person would just understand the way you are saying, right? Even some people go a step further. How many people are married? Nobody's married. Okay, it's not relevant, but I'll give you an example. How like things can be interpreted. Like for example, sometimes wife says to husband, go and in the morning. Oh, sorry, when you come back from office, buy some eggs, right? Okay, husband goes and buys some eggs, right? When he comes home, he says, where is the bread? So you didn't say for the bread. But, you are stupid. We do breakfast every day. You have to buy eggs. You should have bought the bread too, right? So it is like just expect the other person, right? Okay, or same is or the other way, like husband says, go and iron my shirt for tomorrow morning, right? And wife goes and iron the shirt. So where is my trouser? So you didn't say you have to iron the trouser, but sometimes people just expect, right? So it's like over interpretation. So, but here is an example. Like in this example, if you just put little punctuation, it says woman without her, man is nothing, right? Now the women are happy. Okay, so when the thing is just putting proper punctuation, the meaning is totally different. Okay, so I mean it's there's general English, but when you write scientifically, when you make a scientific statement, right, you have to be clear what exactly you want to say, right? You have to have proper punctuation, and if you write in a way that you're thinking something, but you're writing in a way that other people think the other way, right? As in this sentence, like if you just read it, woman without her man is nothing, right? Or woman without her man is nothing, right? In one case, it looks like the woman is nothing, and the other case looks like man, they are nothing, right? So again, it's just an example, right? And some examples like that, $25 bill, right? So here implies is like there's a $25 bill, right? Okay, in the second sentence, the same wording, right? The hyphen is placed on two different places, right? Like $25 bill, right? How much money you have now? The 20 bills, each is $5, right? In the second sentence, Sorry, the second one is like $25 bill. So you have $5 bill, and there, how many you have? You have 20. So you have about $100, right? But if you say $25 bill, so it's like there's a $25. It's only one bill, right? Same as like there's another example like that. Doctor said the mayor is an idiot, right? It means usually typically people will say that okay, the doctor is saying that the mayor is an idiot. Okay, the doctor said the mayor is an idiot. So if you really want, the doctor, whatever doctor said, if that's true, then you have to, put that in inverted commas, right? Because that's exactly what doctor said, right? Or doctor said the mayor is an idiot, right? So in this case, mayor is saying the doctor is an idiot, right? So you see how this little bit punctuation can exactly, change the meaning. Right? So these are some of the examples to give you an idea that what the precision and what the accurate, clarity means. So when you have to write something, it has to be very clear, right? Now the second thing is precision, right? Precision means you have to, whatever you're writing, you write in a way that it means only what it means, right? But if it can be interpreted in different ways, it means you are writing it clearly. Right. Now, for example, in this sentence, he says, after Mr. Smith's death, John, Mary, and Mike shall get equal shares from the inheritance. Right? Okay, so what it means, for example, Mr. Smith died. Okay, he left about $90,000 in the bank account, right? So, how much money each will get? Very clear, right? Okay, $30,000, right? Okay, each will get, everybody get an equal share. Okay, well, that's what Mr. John was saying. Mr. John is dead. Nobody can go back to him and say, well, that's exactly what you mean. Everybody should get $30,000, and probably he meant that. Because he has 3 kids, he wants to divide money equally, right? But what happens that John is not very happy. He said, well, my father actually said that, after, that John, Mary and Mike shall get equal shares. Because Mary and Mike is together. So he said, well, it's $95,000. I should get 45, and the rest of the 45 should be divided between Mike and Mary. Right? Now, the thing is that John has created a problem here. Right? And Mary and Mike cannot go back to see Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is there, right? So what happens? They have to go to court, okay? And court is going to decide. Now, court is going to decide what is written, the way it is written, not what was the intention of Mr. Smith. And even the judge probably knows that Mr. Smith has 3 kids. He wants to give, why he would give a different amount of money to different people, right? But the court says no, John is right. The way it is written, it says, after Mr. Smith's death, John, Mary, and Mike shall get equal shares. So John get 45%, $45,000, and the other $45,000 will be divided between Mary and Mike. That was and it's a rare case. Get equal shares, right? Because that's how it is written. Okay, so you can make a small mistake, not clarifying it. If this has to clarify, then what it is you're supposed to write in a way that Mr. Smith's dead, John, comma, Mary, comma, and Mike shall get equal shares from the inheritance. Right? In this case, it is clear that okay, everybody will get equal share. So the only difference was, this my comma moved. Okay, so the circulation will become was here, right? This comma. This comma make Mary and Mike lose about about some money, right? And then this comma is called like it's called like Oxford comma now. There's a name for this, Oxford comma, and I know that the way we learn the grammar. Oh, okay. Okay, so the way we learn the grammar in old days, we're not supposed to put a comma here, right? Then the last one we just say and, right? That's how we learn, right? But the things are changed now. Now you have to have a comma here if you want to make it clear. So still, that kind of things is okay, because still people are, some people are having the old style, they write that way. But if you're writing it to more precision, especially when you're doing scientific writing, then you have to pay attention to some of these things. So this is, just to, that's what it means by precision. Okay. So that's just a small, some kind of introduction what exactly scientific writing is. And we will go through a lot of examples to show where and how to write and what particular words you need to use. So just to give you some idea that the writing task, scientific writing is not one kind of writing, right? It's English, but there are different ways to, and there are different kind of things, and there are different topics or subtopics. They should be there in different kind of writing tasks. Like for example, your writing start from lab books, right? Lab notes or lab books. The day you start in the lab, your supervisor give you a notebook. You say, well, okay, put all your data, whatever you do, write in there, right? And that could be very little bit organized. You don't have to write complete sentence. You can write things there just to make sure that what you do, you remember what you are going to do and or what you have done, so that you write it down, that when you have to go back, write your thesis, you can go from your notes and learn from there, right? So it's very casual kind of writing, right? Then the other thing is that you work in a lab for a while and there's a conference, you have some data, your supervisor says, well, it's about time you present a poster, right? And submit an abstract, right? So that's your second kind of, from lab book, you were like a little bit advanced. Now you're writing an abstract, right? And then you did some work, then you go write your research paper, you publish few papers, you got enough data, you write your thesis, right? Once you write your thesis, hopefully everything goes okay, you got your degree, and then most of the people end up in academia. So, they probably supervising other students and starting their own research. And then for that kind of things, then they have to write research proposals so that they can make a project, and write the proposal, see that if somebody likes it, somebody is going to fund that proposal, get some money, hire some technician, buy some reagents and chemicals, right? So that's another kind of writing, right? And then, you develop, you're working your area for a while, you develop some kind of expertise, then you start writing review articles, book chapters, you become famous, then people ask you to write editorial and, and commentaries and all that. So it's the sequential, things, one thing progress to other thing and that progress to other things, right? And every writing is certain, is not only just writing, but it has different components, right? What you write in the paper, the way you write in the paper is not exactly the way you write your thesis. The thesis is more detailed and all that, but what the things you write in your thesis, you cannot write for a research proposal, right? There are such other requirements in the research proposal, and same as review articles and so forth, right? So we go through some of the details through all these kind of writing. So the most of the time, you write your thesis one time. Abstract is like things you write often, but the most important is the research paper, because the research paper is the one which you've been, after your thesis, you've been publishing your work and writing. So it is like an original finding for your lab investigation. Typically, it's work of many years, many months or years. And then the style or the format, it varies from journal to journal, right? You submit to a journal. If they don't like it, they will send it back to you. Then you will have to submit to another journal. And then all the journals, they have different formats, right? So you have to look for their formats, change the format and submit it, right? Okay, it serves as a mean for your contribution to science. Whatever you discover, whatever you found, you want to tell the world, hey, I've done this research and that's how I've done it, and that's what it means, and that's you're advancing the knowledge, right? Writing the paper. So your purpose is to write a paper to advance the knowledge and tell everybody. Okay. Now, often you have to write multiple drafts, right? If you think that, you just write one time, and that's what typically people do, they write and then they just give it to your supervisor to, oh, my work is done now, your work starts from here, you make corrections and all that, right? Should not be like that, right? You should, give your supervisor your draft in a form that he or she has to do minimum corrections, right? Because your supervisor doing a lot of correction, you would not probably understand, and because sometimes your supervisor kind enough to tell you what is wrong and what is right, but sometimes they will just do the correction. You are happy that okay, the correction is done and one more step is done. Now we can send it off, right? So you should write multiple drafts. Write draft, go back again, polish it, change, to see the things. How you can modify the sentence, take the extra work out, because sometimes when you write too much and then it may not be necessary. So it's not that anything you write there, it has to stay there, right? Sometimes less is better. You write more, you get into more troubles because less is more questions. You write less just to explain your point, that's the best thing. So you don't have to say too much or too little, okay? And often, you have to show your work to other, your colleagues, your senior students and all that, colleagues, your friends, or your mentor, and get some suggestion, and then again revise it. Okay. Thesis is a description of your mentor research, right? It's supposed to have, it should have new knowledge. It should show scholastic achievement. Whatever you have done, you should be reflected in your thesis, right? And the main critical thing in the thesis is the critical thinking. And often people I've seen in thesis what they do, the most famous thing, cut and paste, and then try to fill the pages, make it thicker and all that. But often they lack the interpretation, what their data means, and most often what they concentrate is increase and decrease, or this thing is increased, this is decreased, this is inhibited, this is stimulated. But then you have to see, why, why something is happening and what exactly it means. What is your interpretation, or what are the possible interpretations? So this all comes with the, critical thinking, that you think about your data, right? Then you go to research proposal, right? So research proposal, your independent PhD research work. Once you've done your PhD, you have you either continue your own project, what you did in your PhD, extend it, or you start a new project, right? Often you need the research proposal to get funding, because you cannot survive really if you don't bring the money from outside to support your research. You can get some funding initially from your sponsor institute, whoever hired you, but after a while you become like independent, and then you get money, and then you have to write for that research proposal, and you go through that, or the at least research proposal or the synopsis you write in the short form of a complete proposal, and then again there's certain things that should be there, okay, and then again you have to follow the format of the funding agencies, right? Then we move on, and we have now review articles and book chapter, right? Which is compilation of work from many investigators. Like you've been in the area for a long time. All the in and outs of your field. You can see things up, down, sidewise, and everything. So you are a little bit expert in that area, right? So what you do, then you get ideas. You think that okay, the things are going in which direction. Okay, maybe it's time to write a review. Okay, so you get all the references when you try to summarize a certain topic or certain area. So, okay, so this mostly is summarizing large number of studies. You are providing like a historical perspective, providing new information. And then not only that, you're getting all the data, and then you are interpreting the data, right? So you might find these things are similar, several stations repetitively similar thing. Then then you can make a conclusion that okay, that's what is happening because this has shown that kind of thing. But sometimes you say, well, some of the people shown like this, some of the people shown like this, and then you try to show well why this data is different to this data. What are the differences? What are the similarities, right? And why they interpreted the way they interpret it, and what would be other possible interpretation, or when you combine two together, which is in opposing direction, what would be the new interpretation, or what would be, or what need to be done in order to prove which whoever is right, right? So that's how you discuss in your review article and your, in book chapters. After that, it comes editorial. Editorial is thing which is usually from the editorial board. You have some kind of a name area. You become like a member of editorial board. And usually, the chief editor say, well, you've been working in this area, why don't you write an editorial? So it's usually, typically is by invitation. Usually something very hard, like, COVID, if you're working in this area and that's your background, this is very hard area. So people say, well, why don't you write that aspect of COVID, like, how the inspection is spreading, or you're working in some kind of nutrition therapy. So well, maybe write a review article or editorial, how the nutrition can be effective in preventing the COVID. So it's like, or there's maybe sometimes controversial topics, something people are saying all along, like for last 10 years, there's a one belief, all of a sudden somebody published a paper and it's totally different, saying something different, right? So then you're an expert, then you write, why it is controversial and what, is the person is right or wrong, whatever, right? So you have to provide the expert opinion, and then you have to think, what needs to be done in that area. So it becomes like editorial, is usually one page, typically. And then, we have commentaries. Commentaries is also like, most of the time is by invitation. Just, reflect the expert opinion on new and controversial published findings. Usually, you tell about the weak and strong point of the study, future direction. So it's like, commentaries are usually like somebody's work, somebody has published something which is novel, right? Or something different. And so you have to write a commentary that, what that exactly what means and what is like, controversial in there, right? And if it's a strong study, whether it's a strong study or weak study, or the opinion which is present in the paper, it is weak or strong, what kind of evidence they have. So you have to, discuss all that kind of things. And then you have to suggest, what else can be done in order to, prove that the new findings, right? Okay, so these are some of these things. We go more in detail on research papers, right? Now, research paper has like certain components, and these are, the things I have listed here. Here are some of the components. Like, that has to have a front page, okay? And front page should contain a lot of information like title and the affiliations, names, and all that. And we go some of the examples, right? So like a title, author's name, affiliation, short running title, keywords, address to corresponding author. So all they should be on the front page, so that the journal want to know about how many authors are there, or want to communicate with you. All the information is already there. They don't have to fill pages and try to find the information. Rather, it should be there present. Then you get abstract, right, or summary. Then typically, they have like introduction and background in the paper, and I'm sure you all have seen papers and what's in there. Experimental procedure, materials or methods sometimes follows by introduction, sometimes introduction, in some journal have introduction, background, and then results. And the materials and method comes at the very end. They have discussion, conclusion, and then the last part is in the materials and method. Then you have statistical analysis, results, discussion, conclusion, right? So these are typical content, right? But then you have to add certain things too, and you make sure you do a good job in all of these three acknowledgements. You have to acknowledge people. We go through some of the examples. These days, almost every journal requires some kind of conflict of interest in statement. It's like essential. You have to add that. Author's contribution is used to be like you write a paper and you have a friend. It has nothing to do with the study, but it's a, well, I can put my name on the paper so I get the publication too. I'll buy you a dinner. So okay, I'll put your name on the paper, right? So those are gone. Like journal needs to know exactly what you have done, right? And by saying that, you're telling everybody that this person has contributed in this paper and what exactly that person has done, right? So you have to justify the contribution. So you have to put the author's contribution. References, you have to follow the format of the journal for the references. Figure legends, and there's the figures you put. You have to really explain them in a way that you have a figure, and if you drop that figure accidentally on the floor and somebody pick it up, look at the figure. After reading the legends, they should be able to understand what that figure means, right? So whenever you writing the figure, you should have this thing in mind. Okay, what people do is that they have a figure and there's a title, and then there's nothing else there, right? So to understand that figure, you have to read the whole text, right? And then try to understand what is exactly the experiment is, what is this data and what it means, right? So it becomes more complicated. You should be you should have in mind that, okay, you're putting up figure in your thesis or your paper is in a format that people look at the figure and understand, right? If you're confused, you're not sure, give that figure to somebody and say, hey, can you take a look and do you understand? If the person understands that figure, it means you done a good job. If they say, well, I don't know what it means, then it means you have to add something on that figure that the person can understand the content, the figure, without actually reading the text. Okay. Same thing goes with the table. You have to, with the table, you have to really define all the units, explain everything in the table, and have some kind of legends too, because you can present your data either in a table form or in a figure form, right? Something, figure is like a more visual, you can see it easily. Table is like, sometimes data you cannot present in a figure form. There are too many numbers. There's going to be too many bars, and then so you can include that in the data format, in the table format, right? But same goes to table. That if you drop the table on the floor, somebody else pick it up, they can look at the table and say, oh, okay, that's what it means. Okay, but if they're just numbers and there's no explanation what the column is, what the units are, and no description about the little bit experimental detail, then it becomes really confusing, right? So tables, figures, and then supplementary data. These days, especially a lot of techniques are used, and you cannot really explain everything clearly, right? So often, journal require that you add those as a supplementary data, right? So these are all the contents of a research paper. Okay, so that's an example. It's one of my paper. So the front page should look like this. All right. So what you have, this focus, can you read? Probably it's too small, but then you have a title here, right? And we'll go, how the title should look like. Okay, and then you have the names of the authors, right? And then there's asterisk, the numbers here, where you can see that which affiliation belongs to which author, right? So you put all their details. Okay, and then if there's something extraordinary, then you have to mention, like in this case, it says a statistical review consultant or consulted by Dr. Kerry Mariesh. So you provided that you use some kind of expert help for the analysis of data. Short running titles, keywords, and you have to take precaution when you write keywords that the words should not be just repetitive of your title. There should be something different, because it gives you an advantage. Because when people search, then they, if the words already present in the title, the search can pick it up. But if there are different words here, then then other words can pick up your paper, right? So you're providing, you should use this for your advantage, so that the keywords are choosing in a way that it give you an advantage, that people have more chances to pick up your paper, right, and read it. Because every time these days, everything is online. People go and click your paper, it counts. And at the end, I don't know if you're familiar with ResearchGate or Google Scholar. If you go there, it says this paper is seen by that many people, right? Okay, or it's been cited by that many people, right? So it's for your advantage. The more clicks you have on your paper, it just shows that more people have seen your paper, right? If you have a paper which nobody can find out or nobody ever seen, it just looks bad on you, right? So it's just kind of something which you can use for your advantage, right? Then you have to provide the emails of all the authors, right? So that journal can send communication to all the authors, and anything changes, then they know what is happening. Because this is again for your advantage, right? Because if these all the authors are included, their emails is included, so what happens? There has been cases that people say, well, we don't agree. The paper is published, my name is there, but really I really don't agree whatever is there, right? But if the paper has gone, because usually journal acknowledge and send the information to all the authors saying that this paper has been submitted and all that. So it means you already got the information. Later on, you cannot say, oh, somebody just put my name on the paper. Actually, I have nothing to do with this paper, right? So, and then you can show, well, it's been sent 5 times to you from the, why didn't you tell before? Why you pass? So it actually goes against that person, right? So all these things help. Okay? And then you clearly provide the address for correspondence. Sometimes it can be, usually it's typically one person who does the correspondence. And sometimes it's like, more than one person, because if they are, people on 2 different institutes, or one person like a PhD student going back to his, or her country, supervising another country. So they have like, multiple authors as corresponding author, so that people can, it is because if somebody has any question, so they know where to go, who person to find. There's like 6 people on the as an author list, right? But who is responsible to address if there is a question, right? Usually it's the corresponding author, right? And there's also issue the corresponding author actually the works belong to that author. So because doing the correspondence, so if anything happens, usually it's the corresponding author who either get famed or defamed. Like if there's something which is you publish something, there's a novel finding, and then people say, oh wow, this is a really good finding, and then they want to have a press release, or somebody wants to interview. Who they're going to interview? The corresponding author. So again, it's important when you choose a corresponding author that you have to a person who is responsible or who can say something about that research, right? That's the corresponding author, right? Now we'll go some examples about from everything. Like we would practice titles, how to write an abstract, what should be in the results and section, materials and method, discussion, and all that, and what kind of things you have to add, right? So the title, okay. So what you need to do is that you have to make the title informative and specific. It has to be very specific and informative, right? Very concise. You can write, I've seen the title like 5 lines. By the time you start and read, you don't even remember what you read 2 minutes ago, right? It's just too long. Sometimes you cannot avoid because of the the way the study is done, or the way you want to present the information. But in majority of time, more concise title is the best, because people can read and probably remember. But it has to be informative. You cannot just miss the information and just add some 2 words title, right? If there is like animals or some kind of bioorganism is involved, then you have to provide the appropriate taxonomical information, right? Typically you have to avoid any abbreviation in the title, but there's some abbreviation which are so common, like DNA. So you can write, because everybody, there's nothing else. In majority of time when you say DNA, people know what DNA means, right? So some of the very, very common abbreviation you can use, but generally it's better if you can spell deoxyribonucleic acid, so there's no confusion. Okay, and then you have to have like relevant keywords in the title, so that when people are looking for that information, that what you are going to present in your paper, so they can find out easily, right? And second, for your advantage, more people find your paper, more clicks you get on you, right? Okay. And that's the more important thing, is that the title should actually reflect the content. And I have seen many times that the title says something and actually the content's saying something really different. Or you just use a broad title, very broad title, and when you see the paper or the thesis is really very narrow work, that really justify using a very broad title, right? So some of these things can be avoided, right? typically what you need to do is that, nobody's perfect. You don't think that you write a title and it's going to be just perfect, right? So write 3 or 5 different titles with the keywords. What is your study? Just have those keywords first, and then arrange in a way which make more kind of informative, specific, and concise, right? And write 3 or 4 different ways. Show it to other people and see what people like the title, right? Before you finalize it. So that give you, some kind of idea that which is easy or to follow, or what people can understand, right? So informative and specific, what it exactly means, right? So for example, there's a real title. It says dominance behavior in rhesus monkey. What's wrong with the title? Is it informative? Why is it not informative? Yeah, just be interactive. Don't yeah.
Kind of a behavior, not a because not expensive about behavior.
One at a time. Sorry.
It is not about expensive about the behavior. Behavior is not mentioned here. It's
Okay.
type of behavior.
Okay. Anything else?
And what comes to dominancy is very
What kind of dominancy? Yeah. Dominancy could be anything, like territorial dominancy, right? Social dominancy, right? So this is really not clear from this title that what kind of dominancy they are talking about, right? There's a dominance behavior, but what kind of dominance behavior? Aggressiveness, right? There's also, so if we can, explain like, androgen-induced social dominance in infant female rhesus monkey, right? It's not that long, but it's so clear, right? Okay, it's give you exactly what you trying to tell, right? That is an androgen-induced social dominance in infant. What kind of rhesus monkey? Can be any kind of. It can be, you don't know whether it's male, it's female. What is the age of the monkey, right? But when you write in a way that androgen-induced social dominance in infant female rhesus monkey, tell you everything, right? Okay, this specific thing, kind of dominance, using what kind of monkeys we are using, right? Same as aspects of territoriality in lizards, right? So again, why it's a very vague title again, right? So why? Exactly, what kind of aspects? Can be many kind of aspects. What kind of aspects of territoriality in these lizards, right? Any other suggestion? What kind of results? It's possible. You don't know. That's how many times. Just try to interact. Don't shy. There's nothing wrong asking or saying a wrong answer, right? It's better to say a wrong thing rather than not to say anything, because it's like when you say a wrong thing, at least you're using your brain. If you're not saying anything, it means you're not using your brain. You're just an idle. You're just sitting there and listening, right? So try to contribute. So again, this is so again. So you have to so the adaptive significance of territoriality and invite lizards, right? So it's more clear, right? So that's just an example, and this is my famous one, and I've seen this so many times people like that put the title like this, especially I'm talking about when I'm talking about we're talking about countries like in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Middle East, that's what we get, things like, even in English speaking countries, there's sometimes, things are written in a way that is very confusing. So I'll look at fungus toxin, right? Okay, it's so vague, what kind of look? I'll look at the fungal toxin, right? So again, it's not really, doesn't really tell you, it tells you about something that has to do with fungal toxin, okay? So, but the more probably the role of fungal toxin in plant disease, right? It has to be more specific. What kind of, looking, effects of fungal toxin, right? Other thing is as I said, that you have to have taxonomical information, like in this case, like eating frequency in butterflies. Okay, and it's a microorganism, not micro, it's an organism, butterfly. So whenever you're using an organism, like studying that organism, like That's one thing that you're using rates for your studies. You don't have to mention, it's in the rate because there's a subject you're using, right? But if you do, studying the rate itself, right? Behavior of rate and all that, then you have to specify like is a spark goalie or is a Fisher rates or whatever, right? Then you have to provide the taxonomical information, right? So eating frequency in butterfly can be of different kinds, but when you say like, in this case, like, eating frequency is papilio, right? Again, papilio is butterfly, but how many people know that papilio is a butterfly? Probably not. I mean, I did not know if papilio is a butterfly, right? So again, you put the taxonomical information, but it's not, again, very clear, right? But you say something like, eating frequency in butterflies of genus papilio, right? Okay, so it makes more clear, more sense that, that's your title. And the third thing you have to look for your title is it has to be very concise, right? Sometimes people use too many words, and it's okay, you can write the title, use as many words as you can, but then you go back and try to see, if you can make it concise, you can make it more informative, right? So like here is the preliminary studies on primary productivity and phytoplankton diversity in 4 Wisconsin lakes, right? Okay, so it's a long title, right? So you can be, the preliminary studies, you can avoid. You just say the primary productivity and phytoplankton diversity in 4 Wisconsin, right? Make it more concise, right? Okay. Notes on the ambient temperature and metabolic rate on the activity of New Mexican lizards, right? Okay. Make it more short, like, effect of ambient temperature and metabolic rate, right? So it's a little less wordy, right? There's also a paper I reviewed, actually, there was a title like, again, this species I cannot really pronounce it rightly. It's a Yersha guma, and there's a taxonomical name, the Himalayan goat, right? Colon. High medicinal value fungus in Himalayan region, semicolon, scientifically ignored, right? You get the message what it is, but it is it's not really, the way it is really not very professional or not really right? The way you can write is that, yes, a Goomba, okay, colon, and then, so you're talking about that a high medicinal value fungus in Himalayan region needs scientific evaluation, right? Or you can say that, that yes, a Goomba, a high medicinal value fungus in Himalayan region lacks scientific evaluation, right? So you can, see how you can modify it, right? And these are some of the titles, actually, these are the real theses from this university. People have got their PhD, this, title is not going to disqualify you for getting a PhD, but it's just, it just reflects that how much really you're thinking about it. It just shows your, thinking ability. So let's see the first example, like, modulation of proliferation and apoptotic biomarkers in oral and other cancers, right? What's wrong with this title? Yeah, there's now a lot of things, other cancer, right? It's oral and other cancer, right? Now, what other cancer, right? I mean, their cancer is like almost like every organ has a cancer, right? So it's really, one is okay, it's oral, you understand, we're talking about oral cancer and other cancer. So it's like, it's like very, very vague, right? It has to be more concise, if it's oral and, other, it has to define it's a brain cancer, breast cancer, stomach, liver, one or leukemia, blood cancer, kidneys, whatever cancer is, you have to really test. Otherwise, you make, if it is only oral and there is more studies on the other cancer, you just stop, it says in oral cancer, right? You don't have to really force yourself to say, well, I have studied all kind of cancer, right? You don't have to tell, because you are open to criticism, right? And people are going to ask more questions, right? Now, here is the study of regenerative potential. And again, I don't mean anything bad about any of this title, right? It's just that people write it. I write sometime and I don't pay attention what I'm writing unless you read it a couple of times and try to, see that, things are, you can improve it, right? study of regenerative potential of various population of stem cells in cardiomyocytes. What's wrong here? Say it a little louder on camera here. Somebody says something. Which one? Okay, study of regenerative potential of various population of stem cells. No, it's not. You mean various population? Okay. Any other? There could be, yeah, then you don't have to say the study of, right? Okay, just say the regenerative potential of various population, right? So there are multiple things wrong, right? You're right, this study. The other thing is various population. Again, the various what population, right? It's again very vague, it's not very specific, right? It's not concise because, this is just an extra word. Study of population. Of course, you study, and you can that just all of a sudden walk up and then you have the data, right? So there's no need to say study, right? But sometimes, people depends, what you're saying. There's nothing wrong. Again, there's nothing wrong with title. It's just that you can, it's a practice just to show you how you can be a better writer, right? And how can you do from this exercise learn to write more specific and concise, because eventually you guys will get your PhD and then you will have your own research. You'll be supervising. So if you don't learn, then you cannot even teach anybody, right? So and that happens. I've seen supervisors that their students theses which is really poorly written because of, I'm not talking about this university. I'm talking about other places, that you can get the idea that how come the supervisor actually let this thesis go through without doing the correction. So anyway, study of the effect of antioxidants on oxidative state in molecular and cellular models, right? So what's wrong with that? Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong, but how can you make it better? Perfect. Yeah, there are so many oxidants. Which kind of oxidants you're talking about? Iron is an oxidant, right? Okay. Copper is an oxidant. So it doesn't really say that what oxidant you are talking about. Is a not a really good title. Okay. And then study of again is the extra word. You can just say effect of antioxidant on oxidative stress, right? So again, so I hope you get some kind of idea, right, about how to write your titles, right? Okay. Now the second thing is the abstract. Okay. Okay. Now the abstract is the most important part of your research paper or your thesis, right? Because it actually tells you what you have done, and people actually, unfortunately, some people don't really pay attention writing the abstract. Right? You send a paper, the very first thing somebody is going to read is the abstract. If they don't like the abstract, they're not going to go bother reading the whole paper. They immediately says, and send to paper back rejected, right? They're not going to. I mean, the study is done excellent. There may be excellent data, but the way the abstract is written is just turn the people off, right? They don't understand. It's confusing. It's saying what is exactly. It's saying too much, too little, and all that. So you have to really pay attention on abstract. And there's a habit that people think that abstract you can cut and paste and then make your abstract. So you cut and paste a few lines from introduction, you cut and paste a few lines from materials and method, you cut and paste exactly a few lines from result section, and then your discussion section, you cut 2 lines from there, and then your abstract is ready, right? Well, you can do that, but I mean, like people publish all kind of work, but that's not the way it should be, right? Abstract should be impressive, right? It show exactly what you are trying to say, and again, it has to be very specific and concise. Typically, it's like about 200 to 250 words. Occasionally, you find journal which goes up to like 300 words, right? But the 200 is the minimum. But some journal even have shorter abstract, like 150 words. But there are only few. The majority of journals they want abstract somewhere between 200 to 300 word limits, right? Again, it should be stand alone. like again, the same thing is, you know, if you have the abstract, somebody drop on the floor, somebody pick it up, read the abstract, should be able to read what is the study is going to be about, right? It should be very, very like, you know, thing which is already explained in the everything in the abstract, right? And then, you know, that typically you don't have to put references or the citation in the abstract. A lot of people do, right? And some journals, well, you know, if you writing an abstract for a meeting or conference, that's probably acceptable. But abstract for a research paper, because there is, you know, you have introduction, materials, and method, you can use references, you know, for your text in that areas. So you don't have to really add references in the abstract, right? Okay. Now the common mistakes people make is that, you know, it's like too much background or method information. You know, sometimes people go like, you know, 3/4 of an abstract is just introduction. It's just going on and on and on because they want to tell about everything, like the whole history of the topic that was discovered there, and that happened, and that happened, and that happened, and it has so many benefits. It's going on. You really don't have to put everything in the abstract. You have to be very concise, right? Sometimes, you know, in the like conferences abstract is okay, you put some figures and images because that's the only thing you're going to have. But in research articles, you don't, you know, put figures and images. Again, people put like references to literature, figures and images, and abbreviation or acronyms. Sometimes the people use too many abbreviation. Yes. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a different kind. You know, some journals want that you have abstract and they ask you to have a graphic abstract. Okay, that's a totally different. It doesn't mean that you have to put graphs in your abstract, right? You have to write the abstract, again, the same abstract, but then you have to provide some picture or something for your, you know, which shows your study, right? Just, you know, this graphic abstract, right? Okay, how you formulate or how you actually write your abstract, right? So there is a simple recipe. It's not that hard and fast rule, but typically what you need to do is that when you write the abstract, you have to have only 2 or 3 sentences for the background or problem, right? You don't have to tell the entire history of a topic, who discovered it, how discovered it, or wherever. You have to just say what is relevant to your work, right? 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, there's what you're working on and then what is the problem here, right? Okay. And then you have to come about 1 sentence about your hypothesis, right? If you say you hypothesize something, but not everything is based on hypothetical, you know, work. And so you have to write objective. So what is the objective? What you want to gain from this knowledge? You know, why are you doing this, right? So only 1 sentence, okay? 2, 3 sentence experimental to describe how the work is done. So, okay, that's what I'm working on. That's what I think I'm, you know, that's what I want to do. That's how I did it. That's what I found. And that's what it means, right? So simply like that, like you have 2, 3 sentences of results and then 1 to 2 sentences discussion. And then the last, you know, 1 sentence is the conclusion, right? So if you have all like this, you get about, you know, 200 to 250 words. And I will give you some examples, right? Okay. Now this abstract, let's see this abstract and see what's the problem with it. This is the abstract. Actually, it's a abstract. I got a PhD thesis to review from Egypt, right? Now, what it says, you know, the title is Cloning and Characterization of Mitomycin C gene from Streptomyces lavandule, right? Anything wrong with the title? Okay, title is okay. I mean, you know, it's not a bad problem, right? Okay, we're talking about the abstract, right? We have to find, you know, what's wrong with the abstract. Okay, let's read it, right? It said, Streptomyces are filamentous gram-positive soil bacteria with a nucleotide-based composition greater than 70%, G plus C, right? And then there's a reference here, okay? They produce a wide array of biologically active compounds, including over 2/3 of the commercially important natural product molecules, right? And then there's a reference, okay? Genetic information accumulated over the past 15 years has demonstrated the genes encoding enzyme for natural product assembly are clustered on Streptomyces genome, right? And then there's a citation. Heterogeneous hybridization with gene probes based on highly conserved biosynthetic enzyme amino acid sequence has been useful to clone antibiotic resistance genes, right? Okay, there are multiple citations here. The mitomycin are a group of natural products that contain a variety of functional groups, including amino, benzoquinone, and aziridine ring systems. In particular, since its discovery and demonstration of anti-cancer activity in 1960, many aspects of chemistry and biology of mitomycin have been investigated, right? This has provided detailed information on its unprecedented molecular mechanism, unique biological and pharmacological properties, drug resistant and bioactive analogs, right? And then multiple citation. Okay, this is the abstract of a thesis, right? First, what is wrong with that? Okay, first thing is that you have the whole thesis, to provide these references in appropriate places. You don't have to really put the references in the abstract, right? Okay, that's okay. What else? So first thing is that, as I said, the abstract should reflect the whole thesis, right? Okay, does it reflect the whole thesis? Can you find out, what this person has done really? It says there's something about, like genes and mitomycin, right? But it's really, there's nothing there. There's like, it's all introduction. So basically what the person has done is cut and pasted from an introduction, put it there. So it's just one paragraph of introduction, and then somewhere others from the introduction, get the second paragraph, put it there, and then not even bother reading it, right? That's one thing. The other thing is the supervisor even did not read it, right? He said, well, okay, you got a thesis, 120 pages, looks good. Okay, send it for review, right? Okay. So the thing is that's a very, very, very poor abstract, right? Because it really doesn't, the only thing I can say is just introduction. The introduction of streptomyces in one paragraph, and the second paragraph there's an introduction of mitomycin, right? It doesn't say that what is the problem, what is the objective of this study, right? How the studies were performed, right? And it says, what they found, what happens in that case, like, how they characterize, there's a characterization of mitomycin G. Where is the characterization? There's no data discussed, right? So it's just an extreme example. Not many people, write abstract like this, but this is a very, very poor example, which shows really there's no information there, right? Okay, so this and the abstract here. An abstract, that can be written in different ways, right? Some journal like that you have like headings, a specific heading, like you have a heading, background, method, results, and conclusions. Or some you can have a continuous, same thing, but format should be the same. Like you have a background, you have method, then you have results, and then you have conclusion, right? So, for example, let's see how it is written. Like, so the major obstacle to the successful use of individual nutritional compounds as preventive or therapeutic agents are their efficacy and bioavailability, right? Okay, now its first sentence, there's no kind of, it's direct to the problem. Okay, the problem is that we have natural products, and the problem is their bioavailability, right? Okay, one approach to overcoming this problem is to use combination of nutrients to induce synergistic effects, right? Okay, so you say, well, there's a problem, and what we can do, we can probably use, nutrients with similar activity together, and then we can get this synergistic effect, right? Okay. So the objective of this research was to investigate the synergistic effect of two dietary components, docosahexaenoic acid and omega-3 fatty acid present in cold water fish, and curcumin, and herbal nutrient present in turmeric, in an in vivo model of DMB-induced memory tumorigenesis in mice, right? Okay. Introduction. We say that there's a problem here. That may be a possible solution. So my objective is to see if that is true. If we combine two things and we can small, very clear, and this exactly tells what is supposed to try to tell. Okay, method. Okay, it says we use the carcinogen PMBA to induce breast cancer in Sankar mice on control CCM, DHA, or DHA plus curcumin diet. These are abbreviations already defined, right? Appearance and tumor progression were monitored daily. Tumor were harvested 15 days following their first appearance for morphological and histochemical analysis. Western analysis was performed to determine expression of maspin and surviving in the tumor. Characterization of tumor growth was analyzed using appropriate statistical method. Otherwise, all other reagents, otherwise all other results are reported as mean plus minus standard deviation and analyzed with one-way ANOVA and two key post hoc procedure, right? So it's just like in 4 or 5 sentences, exactly what the procedures are done, right? So two things you have to really tell, what you are measuring or assaying and how you are doing it, right? I've seen the abstract just said that, okay, like for example, like Western analysis was performed, right? Or cytotoxicity assay was done, or like like not exactly explaining done for what, right? Or analysis Western blot was done for what protein. So you have to clarify what assay you're using and for what purpose. What are you measuring? Using what assay? There are two components, for that, right? And then you describe the result. Okay, the analysis of gene microarray data indicates that combined treatment with DH and curcumin altered the profile of PAM50 genes in SKBR3 cell line from an HER2 to they're resembling a normal like phenotype. So you basically, you just describe your results, whatever you get, and then you conclude. So that's one way to write. The other way to write is just to have a continuation. There's no specific headings like abstract, like introduction, materials and method, results and conclusion. In this case, the format is still the same. So here, like for example, again, is like niacin, also known as nicotinic acid, is an organic compound that has several cardio beneficial effects, right? Okay, one introduction, right? Okay, however, its use is limited due to induction of a variable flushing response in most individuals. Okay, you say, well, this is niacin. What is niacin? Okay, and then what is the problem? Okay, finding flushing occurs from a niacin receptor mediated generation of prostaglandin from arachidonic acid. Okay, that's all your introduction, right? So what is this study examine? The ability of docosahexaenoic acid and eicosapentaenoic acid and omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid to attenuate niacin-induced prostaglandin in THP cells. Okay, so that's your objective. That's what you did. You basically use this compound to measure the effect of niacin, right? And then you go on the materials method, right? Niacin-induced both sorry, this is like you kind of experiment, and then you have again go direct to your results, right? And then you explain discuss your result, and then you at the last sentence, right? Here it says in conclusion. So you always last sentence, you cannot just finish your abstract like that. You have to conclude something to what your study is actually concluded to give the message, right? Often people just go read the title and read the last sentence to know that exactly what information is in this paper. Then they go and read if they want to have the interest in that area. Then they go and read more in detail. Okay, so these are some of the things you need to consider when you're writing an abstract. So, any question about how to write an abstract? So, hope you kind of when you have to write the abstract. So keep these things in mind, right? There's a small background, to the point. You don't have to tell the entire history of about that subject, right? Very concise, 2-3 sentences of background, 2-3 sentences about, or one sentence about, what exactly your goal is, what the objectives are, or what your hypothesis is. Okay? 3-4 sentence, how it is done, so people get, some idea that was in the, the experimental section, and then results, and then you just conclude your finding, right? Okay. Now the second thing is introduction, right? Introduction is different. Introduction has different limits. Thesis is more extensive. In paper, it has to be very concise. Okay, so basically, introduction, you summarize the pertinent literature in your area, right? Only the one which is really related to your work. Okay, you actually state some kind of context of your study. So you talk about everything, on that context. Okay. You have to, whatever you say, you have to provide some kind of citation. You cannot just say, just make a statement without any citation, right? Any information you're providing, you have to say, well, okay, somebody has done it, right? And then you provide some kind of rationale of this study, or major objectives, hypothesis, or your prediction. Okay. In thesis is typically about 15 to 25 pages. In manuscript is like about somewhere between 4 to 5 paragraphs. Okay, so it's more concise and to the point. When you write a paper, in thesis you can have lot more details in the introduction section, right? Okay. Now the common mistake, what people actually do wrong when they write the introduction. The very first thing is that there are too much or not enough information. Either they write too much, like it goes on, and or there's not enough, like they're like one paragraph and that's it, right? So if it's too little, then you feel like you need to know more. You have to provide enough background. So whoever is reading your article, whether it's in thesis or in the paper, get a good idea, get a good background, so they can understand, right? So the work you have done, or the experiment you have done, or the results you are going to get, or going to present your thesis or your paper, you should have some kind of introduction about that, so that people have the background. When you go to your research section, then you know why you studied this, right? So they have to make a connection between different, the description you are providing, introduction, to the results you are going to describe, right? Okay. And then sometime they have introduction, but their purpose is not really clear. They're not telling that why they're doing this study. They think that people, whoever is reading, will figure out what is the purpose of this study, right? You should clearly provide, okay, that the purpose of this study was, and then you describe what is your purpose of this study, or the objective of this study is, so people know exactly, very specifically, what is your objective, what are you doing, right? And list, sometimes people just go through, start putting the list, which is not really, in thesis is okay, but in paper you cannot really put some kind of list there, right? Confusing structure, and we go some of the example what confusing structure means, like they're saying something in one sentence, and then the next sentence is like all everything is new, right? You cannot connect, so everything need to be connected. The second sentence has some kind of connection with the first sentence, right? Then you have third sentence has some kind of connection with the second sentence, and that's why it goes in like a flow, right? And we'll go some of the exercise that you can learn, and then you can like when you write, then you keep those things in mind. And sometimes the first person and thoughts, like so I did this, or we did this, right? You need to avoid. You have to just generally talk about it. Okay. So the very first thing when you write, actually in introduction, whether it's a thesis or a paper, the two things, like whose story is this, right? And the clarity. Clarity, we went to the example, in a few example, things need to be clear, with proper punctuation, and then it should be in a way that it should not have two different meanings. Because if you write something, if one person understands one way, the other person understands the other way, So you're not serving the purpose, right? Maybe it means this only, there's only one interpretation which is right, right? But as other people are interpreting in more than one way, that you're not serving the purpose, right? Okay, so it has to be, like, again, as I give the example in the beginning, just by comma, it can be things will be totally opposite, right? And so we have to like whose story and the clarity, right? Now, whose story is like we have to establish when you start a paragraph. Okay, what you're going to say in the paragraph. You have to think about, just write some keywords. That's what you're going to discuss. This paragraph is about, right? Okay. So we, go some of these examples. Like for example, if I start a sentence like the pie smashed John in the face, right? Now, the thing is that I have to establish a context here, what I'm going to talk about. Okay, I'm going to talk about the pie or John or face, right? So it says the pie smashed John in the face, right? Okay, so what message you get here? Really?
By itself smash John's face.
Huh?
Like the pie itself smash John's face.
Pie is self, right? Okay. Well, that's not what I meant. Is that you are going to start. You're starting a paragraph, right? You are going to tell a story, right? And you have to make here whose story is this, right? Is a story about pie or is a story about John? Okay, that's what your first sentence says, that the pie smashed John in the face, right? Okay, so it's like you're saying that the pie smashed John in the face, right? Now then you can make it either way. If you're talking about the story about pie, then the second sentence would say, well, the pie smashed John in the face. The pie was made up of a lot of whatever. It was very thick pie. It has a strong base, and when it hit the John, it smashed the John face, and there was a lot of like sticky stuff on the pie, right? It stuck on the John face, and the pie. You can tell everything about pie. Okay, it becomes like pie story. Then you understand what I'm going to say. So you have to establish, what story or what context you are going to say. Or on the other hand, you can say the pie smashed John in the face, right? You can make it a story for John. Okay, pie smashed John in the face. John was standing in the room. He just entered in the door. People were playing, and the pie just flew, hit the John. John knocked down the floor. He got unconscious. You have to rush John to the hospital. He got 5 stitches, right? He was bleeding bad. He was cursing to other people, all that, right? So it's going to make a story about John, right? So you see the continuation, like, you establish the context, okay? First sentence you write, then you have to make the story about, you have to add the next sentence to explain your first sentence, right? And then you go in the sequence and describe that, right? You cannot just say that, the pie smashed John in the face, and then they said that, Mary entered in the door, and there were 2 boys sitting in the corner, and then there was a party, there was this. It's all the sentences are related. You don't know whose story you're talking about. The party, you're talking about John, you're talking about pie, and all that, right? So it's all confusing. So you don't have to confuse. You can write. There's nothing wrong. But then the thing is that as a professional, especially scientific writer, you have to establish a context. Okay, that's what I'm going to talk about, right? And there are multiple ways of writing the same sentence, right? Okay, for example, the pie smashed John in the face, right? Or John's smashed. So John's face was smashed by the pie. Okay, same kind of thing. But then you have to talk about John's face was smashed by the pie. Now you're talking about more about John's face. Okay, then since it was smashed, the John face was smashed by the pie, and then his face suffers. His face was heavily damaged and all there. So you can write all about what happened to his face, right? He got a lot of things on the pie which entered into his mouth, his nose. He was not able to breathe and all that, right? So you have to establish a context, and then you continue, right? Okay. Now here, there's more thing here, right? Now the sentence is Mary smashed John in the face with the pie. Okay, so now the sentence, we introduce something else here, right? What we introduce here? We introduce Mary, right? Now this the story is all changed here, right? It's the same thing. The pie is John face, you guys smash with the pie. That's what is happening, right? Okay. Well, what happened here that you have like Mary smashed John in the face with the pie. So now you're going to tell about Mary. Okay, so Mary smashed John in the face with the pie because Mary saw John talking to another girls. Mary got so jealous. Okay, Mary did not had no control on herself. Mary took the pie on the from the table and he smashed the pie on the John's face. Mary was very upset. Okay, so you see the context is whose context is Mary. Okay, so you establish now. So first, whenever you write a paragraph, you have to establish that context. Okay, that's what I'm going to talk about, and then you expand it on. Okay, and as I said, there's various ways to write. Like Mary smashed the pie into John's face, right? Or John's face was smashed by Mary. Okay, and then again you can pay attention. You can emphasize that whose story you're going to talk about here. Like John's face was smashed by Mary. Maybe you want to talk about what happened to John's face, right? So then you expand on John's face, that is heavily damaged and all that. Or you can say, well, it's like smashed, but luckily John, moved and did not suffer damages or nothing happened to his face, survived. He was able to attend his meeting and all that. So you're telling all the story about John, right? Okay, John face suffer under Mary's pie attack. Again, is a different way of writing. And then from your first sentence, you can establish the context. Okay, and then it's just a different example. Like John suffers severe injuries as a result of Mary's pie attack, right? And then here you talking about injuries, right? Then you can say, well, John suffers severe injuries as a result of Mary's pie attack. So faces here is like injuries, right? So forget John, forget Mary is the injuries. Okay, that the pie was so strong, pie was heavy. It's like his base was very strong or whatever, and then the weight, his different, several injuries. It's an open wound. He was bleeding. We have to put stitches there. We have to rush him to the doctor, right? So you're talking about all the injuries, okay, that happened because of the pie attack, right? So again, the things can be written in different ways, but you have to establish in the beginning, like from one first sentence, what you're going to talk about, right? And there are different people like in different ways. Like for if you are a lawyer, then the way you write is like the defendant maliciously and without provocation smashed the pie into plaintiff's face, right? Or plaintiff suffers severe and irreversible damage as a proximate result of defendant's malicious and unprovoked pie attack, right? So again, it's the same thing. Everything, all in the example, like 5, 6 example, there's common thing like is John, is Mary, is pie, and injuries, right? So it depends what you're going to, what you want to talk about. You can establish the context, and then you can talk about, right? Okay. So again, this is an example. There are few examples here, and the thing is that when you write, the way you write actually it gives the message to other people, right? And then sometimes you write in a way that you can make a good thing into bad thing or bad thing into a good thing, right? For example, now we go for some example. It says, although Fred's a nice guy, he beats his dog, right? So you say, well, although he's a nice guy, but he beats his dog. Is it a good thing or bad thing? It's a bad thing, my God, but Fred is a nice guy. I know Fred for long. Oh my God, he beats his dog. It's a terrible thing to do, right? Okay. On the other hand, you can say, although Fred beats his dog, he's a nice guy. What message you getting here? You say, well, although he beats his dog, my God, he's a nice guy. Nothing wrong with him, right? He beats his dog, right? It's the same thing, similar kind of word. In one sentence, you are trying to say that although Fred's a nice guy, oh my God, he beats his dog. Okay, or although Fred beats his dog, overall he's a nice guy. Nothing, it's not that bad. Okay, okay, Fred's a nice guy. but he beats his dog. Right? Again, we're trying to say that, there's something you don't like. Okay. Or Fred beats his dog, but he's a nice guy. Okay. Here you're trying to say that, okay, well, he beats his dog, but he's a nice guy. Don't get any bad message or bad thing. Don't think John is bad here, right? Okay. Or like you can say that, okay, Fred is a good husband, a caring father, a fine colleague, and altogether a nice guy, even though he beats his dog. My God, there are so many qualities in Fred. Fred is, he's full of qualities, right? He's a good husband. He's a caring father. He's like, everything is good about Fred. Oh my God. Even though he's, everything is good, but he still beats his dog, right? There's something wrong with John, right? Okay. Or the way you write is that, even though he beats his dog, Fred is a good husband. He's a caring father. He's fine colleagues. Altogether, he's a nice guy. Okay. So now the way you're writing is that, okay, beating dog is not a big deal, really. Overall, John has lot better qualities, just the bite. So the thing is that, when you write, you have to look at your sentence, what exactly you are trying to emphasize, right? It's giving a negative in a message, or you want to give a positive message, right? So you write in a way that what message? If you want to put some mud on somebody, then you write in a way that it will look negative, right? If you want to praise somebody, then you write in a way that even things are wrong, but you are making, praising. Like, okay, even though he beat his dog, okay, like even though he's a great guy. Okay, so that's just a few examples just to give you that it's important to establish the context. Okay, what you're going to talk about, right? And the way you write is that where you want to put the emphasis. Okay, then you describe things accordingly, right? Okay, we got a few more examples here, right? Now it says a gross violation of academic responsibility is required to dismiss a tenured faculty member for cause, and an elaborate hearing procedure with a prior statement of specific charges is provided for before a tenured faculty member may be dismissed for cause, right? It's a long sentence, right? There's nothing wrong, it's like, grammar and everything is okay. But the way it is written is like, it look like, you have to really read it a couple of times to understand what is going on. You read it, you say, well, look like, somebody's getting fired, and then there's some rules, how the person is going to get fired, right? Okay. You can write the same thing in a way that it becomes like more clear. For example, even when a gross violation of academic responsibility is uncovered, the university may still not dismiss a tenured faculty member until, number one, formally makes the faculty member aware of specific charges, and number two, what provides an elaborate hearing, right? So it's clear, okay, you give the person that, okay, you have done this wrong, and then come and see us and tell, why you have done this, right? It's very clear. So again, you can write, but then you have to read it and see if the message is getting clear or not. If it's not, then you have to write in a way that it become like more and more clear, right? Or you can just say that in order for a university to dismiss a tenured faculty member for cause, it must prove a gross violation of academic responsibility, right? Even it's more concise and the same message, right? So there's like a multiple way of writing same thing, but the way you want to write is that it's concise, less word. Less is always better than writing too many words, right? Okay. Same as like, and the example here, right? While the hypothesis from this highly qualified investigator is novel, right? The rationale is poorly unjustified. The studies lack the input of an expert in metabolism, and a more simple approach should be used first to assess the validity of primary hypothesis and primary data and reduction in cost and risk to the experimental subject, right? Okay. So these are, for example, there's a proposal somebody submitted, right? The person read it and write a review, right? Okay, this person is very happy with this report, with this grant or proposal. Is this reviewer look like it's all the negative comments, right? Okay, it's like, and then there's too many. The whole paragraph is one sentence, right? Okay, so when you start reading, you say, while the hypothesis from this highly qualified investigator is novel, okay, you can tolerate, right? Then the rationale is poorly justified. Okay, and then the stages like the input and an expert, and then you start getting tired, okay, in metabolism. And more simple approach should have been, now you're on the fourth sentence, you already lost what you did 2 sentences before, right? You don't even remember, what is all about, right? And then you go on for the access the validity of primary hypothesis and the primary data and reduction in cost and risk management. So I don't know, but you get these guys are very negative, right? Okay, so simply what you can see is that this is an exciting but somewhat flawed application from a creative investigator, right? Okay, so you don't have to really, you can say the same thing with less words, right? Or this creative investigator has produced an exciting but somewhat flawed application. Okay? Or this creative investigator has produced somewhat flawed but exciting application, right? And again, and the way you write is actually, give the impression what are you trying to say about this investigator, right? For example, it's like in the first sentence, it says, this is an exciting but somewhat flawed application from a creative investigator, right? So it's saying, well, the application is flawed, right? So it may not be worth funding it, right? Okay, and if you see the third sentence, said this creative investigator has produced somewhat flawed but exciting application, right? So the way you write it, you're just ignoring that, okay, you're ignoring the flaw. Okay, you say, well, it's somewhat flawed, it's very exciting, right? So again, you are converting a negative thing into a positive thing, just using the appropriate, wordings, right? So again, this, some example of this creative investigator has produced a somewhat flawed but truly exciting application. It means you really like the application, you want to fund this person, right? So you are about to ignore some of the flaws in the application, right? Whereas in the first earlier sentences, you say, well, it is, an investigator is creative, is an exciting proposal, but it is flawed. Okay, so you're saying that, well, I'm not going to fund this, or I'm not going to recommend this for funding because there's, flaws in it, right? So again, the kind of things you need to consider when you write, especially like an introduction, right? You establish the story, you establish the context, what you're going to talk about, and then you tell the story. Okay, and then when you tell the story, try to use less wording. Okay, if you can reduce it, remove the wording, and the message does not get changed, then use the less wording is always better, right? And then certain other things like when you write, and if suppose you involve a flow of information from old to new, so you put in a sequence, right? For example, you go the old to new. Okay, what discovered before, then you go what is more recent. Okay, so for example here, the sentence says the rapid disappearance of Indian culture, okay, is the topic of a recent movie I saw. Okay, so what it is, okay, so a person saw the movie, it's talking to, now you're writing, I saw the movie and that's what I found. So seeing a movie is a all came first, right? Because if you have not seen the movie, you would not have found the disappearance of Indian culture, right? So there's the new information you got, right? So the old information, you saw the movie, so you put in that sequence, right? One recent movie I saw was about the rapid disappearance of the Indian culture, right? I mean, both sentences are right. There's nothing wrong grammatically or English-wise in these sentences, right? But you have to adopt a habit when you write this. The information should flow in a sequence, in a direction. You describe the old information first, and then you move on to the new information, right? Now, here's again, there's something when you write, you have to really, pay attention to this, subordinate clause, right? Subordinate clause, like describing something, then you have to really complete that process of thought, right? You don't leave every, person in middle. Like, for example, in this sentence, it says, industrial spy. Okay, so it means it has something to do with industrial spy. Okay, so you say industrial spy. Okay, your brain is open. You want to know something about industrial spy, and it said industrial spying because of the growing use of computing. So, well, what has to do with the spying and the computer, right? So, because of the growing use of computer to store and cooperate information is increasing rapidly, right? What happens? So, your thought process is actually got interrupted, with this extra information, right? You said, no, the information you're trying to give here is that industrial spying is increasing rapidly. Okay, that's your thought, right? But that's your message. So, but you are giving the half message, and then you start giving the information in between, right? So you have to avoid, right? Like this thing, right? You can explain, you can still have the information, but you can explain in a way that it doesn't really become like bothersome. Like for example, so what happened when you say industrial spying, and then you're saying because of the use of computer and to store and process corporate information is increasing rapidly, right? Instead of that, you have to say industrial spying is increasing rapidly, right? Okay, you get the message, you complete one thought, and then you can explain, like, because of the growing use of computer to store and process corporate information. That's why industrial spying is increasing, right? So you have to have one thought complete, then you start another thought. You just cannot have like, it's like you're trying to eat something, and then you're about to eat, and somebody come and interrupt you, right? And then start asking you questions. So you're trying to eat, but then you have to stop and give the answer, right? And then you start, another person came and then started something, right? So you know how annoying it is, right? So what typically what you do, you let the person eat and then say, well, you finished, then I talk and talk to you, right? So it's the same kind of thing that you finish one thought, okay, and then introduce the other thought. You don't interrupt like so. Okay, other things you need to consider is active versus passive voice. Like like active voice construction indicates clearly the performer of the action expressed in the verb, right? So whoever has done the work, you can then know that who has done the work, right? Like a decision was reached to postpone the note. Postpone the work, right? A decision was reached, right? Then you don't know who is in the, who made the decision, right? It can be one person, can be 10%, right? So our decision was reached to postpone the vote. But if you want to make it more clear, you say that committee decided to postpone the vote, right? Now you know that, okay, it's not a one-person function, that somebody just came and they say, well, okay, we are going to postpone the vote tomorrow, right? So it has like more information here. So it's, excuse me. So like what I'm trying to say, yeah, that you have to have a more of like complete thought here, right? Now, the other thing which is very, 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 very common, everybody does it, is like this unparalleled right sentences, right? Okay, for example, you see in the first example, it says in Florida, where the threat of hurricane is an annual event, we learned that it is important, number one, to become aware of warning signs. There is precaution to take, and 3, deciding when to take shelter is important, right? Okay, message is clear. There's nothing wrong. It's like it's like, but the way it is written is like it's not like it's not flowing clearly, right? Read again. It says like in Florida, where the threat of hurricane is an annual event, we learned that it is important to become aware of the warning sign. There are precautions to take, and deciding when to take the shelter is important, right? When you write English, you have to, it's like a singing, you have to have the same kind of construction. Like, for example, in the second sentence, what it says, in Florida, where the threat of hurricane is an annual event, we learned that it is important to become aware of the warning sign. Number 2, to know. So because here is like to become, right? To know, to decide. So it's the same kind of construction, right? So it's a parallel construction. What you're doing, it is like in the same kind of flow. So it is like in Florida, where the threat of hurricane is an annual event, we learned that it is important to become aware of the warning sign, to know what precaution to take, and to decide when to seek shelter, right? So you understand what I'm trying to say here? right? So we have to use similar kind of construction in a parallel way. Here, where it's like to become, and then it's become like, there are precaution to take. So it's all together a new kind of, structure and deciding. So it started from to become, there are, and then deciding, right? So like, 3 different way within one paragraph, right? Any other way you can think is you can change this one. So if you want to change in I just want to give you an example. What I mean, like in a parallel, for example, if you want to say here that in Florida, where the threat of hurricane is an annual event, we learned that it is important. Is important is, or like you can say, is becoming aware of warning sign, knowing what precaution to take, deciding when to seek a shelter, right? So in this case, I'm just putting ing, right? Becoming, knowing, and deciding, right? So it has to have like similar kind of, description. Okay, so that's what I mean, like, if it's multiple sentence in a paragraph, or like multiple sentence connecting within a sentence, then you have to have this similar kind of wording to use to go with each other, right? Now, other thing, when you write, you need to avoid noun string. Noun string means like, multiple noun altogether. For example, in this one, this report explains our investment. Investment is a noun. Growth is a noun. Stimulation is like a verb is converting, becoming a noun, right? Projects, right? So there's a string of noun, right? To write it better, you can simply say this report explain our project to stimulate growth in investment, right? So you're just using less nouns. So it's not, you're not doing multiple nouns altogether, right? Same as also avoid overusing noun form of verb, right? Some like implement is a noun, right? Implementation is you are normalizing. Yeah, sorry, implement is like a verb, and you're converting a verb into a noun, right? The implementation of plan was successful, right? Rather saying this is that, you can say the plan was implemented successfully. Okay, so you're using verb as a verb, right? Not converting a verb in kind of a noun. Okay, the other thing is that, you need to avoid multiple negative thoughts, right? Because nobody likes negatives, right? The thing, if you, well, sometimes you have to say things negative, if you have to say it. But whenever you write, try to put things in a positive way. For example, here it says less attention is paid to commercials that lack human interest stories than to other kind of commercial, right? So we have like, lack attention is paid to commercial that lack human interest stories than to other kind of commercial, right? The other way, you can say the people pay more attention to commercial with human interest stories than to other kind of commercials, right? It's the same thing. The message is same, that if you have human involved or the humans are not involved, then people don't pay attention, right? So it's saying the same thing that, if the humans are involved in the advertisement, people are, paying more attention than the advertisement, which is like there's no human, it's just like, description, right? So so it's just like, it's like more, it's give you like a positive thought, where it's kind of give you a negative thought, right? So it's something when you write, especially when you're describing your results and things, then you try to, try to put a more positive image, right, than a negative image. And it's basically, you can say it's still the same thing, but the way you say it can make a change. Let me know when you guys want to take a break. We started like close to 1:30. You want to take a break now? Okay. Okay, we can take a break for like 10-15 minutes and we come back. Okay, we can start. So far, how is it going? You feel like learning something? Mhm. Okay. Well, the idea is here that when you write next time, then you remember some of these things. It's not rules. It's just something you kind of have to pay attention when you're writing, right? So every sentence you write, it means something, right? You just don't want to write anything, right? So whenever you write, you have to go back and see, what exactly you're writing, how you connect one sentence to the other sentence, and what kind of things you need to avoid. Okay. Now there are things like there's a lot of time people use this terms like this, that, these, those, he, she, it. These pronouns, they and we. They're useful pronouns for referring back to something previously mentioned, right? Be sure, however, that what you are referring is clear, right? Okay. And it's very common. I've seen that people do, and they again really don't really make it clear, right? For example, in this one is that with the spread of globalized capitalism, American universities increasingly follow a corporate fiscal model, tightening budgets and hiring temporary contract employees as teachers. This has prompted faculty and adjunct instructors in many schools to join unions, a way of protecting job security and benefits, right? Okay. Now, the thing is, there's nothing wrong with this paragraph or these two sentences. Now, the thing is that what is confusing here is this, right? Okay, if you read it again, what it says that with the spread of globalized capitalism, American universities increasingly follow a corporate fiscal model, right? Okay, so that three things happening here is a globalized capitalism, right? American universities and its fiscal model, tightening budget, hiring temporary contract employees, right? Teachers, right? It says this. Now this here, this doesn't really telling that what this is referring to, right? What? This has prompted what? Globalization has prompted, American universities has prompted, what? Fiscal model has prompted. So this, you mean something, this is doing, this. So this exactly is not explaining, right? What is prompted, right? So often people like this, write this, like, this has prompted faculty and teaching instructor of many schools to join unions as a way of protecting job security and benefit, right? Okay. To make it clarify, what you can say, there's this trend. Okay, so what's happening here, that with the spread of globalized capitalism, American universities increasingly follow a corporate fiscal model, tightening budget and hiring temporary employees, right? So they like a trend that what they're decreasing the budget, and instead of hiring the permanent staff, they have temporary employees, right? So there's obviously a trend. Okay, so what you have to say that this trend has prompted faculty and adjunct instructor at many schools to join unions as a way of protecting job security and benefits, right? Okay, so you understand what the problem here? That when you use this word, you have to really say what exactly you are referring it to. Okay. Now there's another example here. Larissa worked in a national forest last summer, right? Which may be her career choice. Okay. Again, here is what is wrong here. Okay, so Larissa worked in a national forest last summer, right? Which may be her last choice career, right? Okay, so in this, which is really not clear what this which is referring to. Is that is referring to Larissa, her work, forest, what? Like his maybe last career. It means working in the forest is last career, or working in the last summer, right? It's a choice. Like she doesn't want to work anymore in this summer, right? So there's like it's not really very precise. When you do scientific writing, you want to make, again, one thing is that you want to make sure that you say exactly what you mean, right? Okay, so Larissa worked in a national forest last summer, which may be her career choice, right? Okay. Okay, Larissa worked in a national forest last summer. Forest management may be her career choice. Okay, so now it's clear that what the forest management is her career choice. Okay, so it's just like instead of which you have to really explain. So all these terms like you use which and all they are like conjunction like conjectures. They join two sentences together, right? But when you join two sentences together, you want to make sure that what exactly you are trying to explain. Okay, which part of the first sentence you're trying to explain. Okay, so what we have usually like we're still talking about introduction, right? So what common mistake people do is that too little information. Okay, information from this section we're talking about. I think it's not introduction. I think it's just the general writing paragraph. Okay. And then people often use too many verbs, right? So you have to really, go back and see if you can reduce the number of verbs you use. And often they start describing the results in the introduction section, right? Because results has its own section. So you have to wait. Sometimes you can, give some hints like, that what's happening in your introduction, but, you have to avoid describing the introduction in your, result in your introduction section, right? No. There's also often problem when people use which versus that. And for some reason, I found that people use that everywhere, like everything is that, and then without knowing, where to use that and where to use which, right? And we go, this example few other times, like, so whenever you use that, okay, that is a possessive, right? It has to have a certain possession, right? Where, and I'll give you some example, like what it means, which is generally like, is like, is non-restrictive. So that is, use of that is restrictive. There are only certain places you can use it, okay? Whereas which is non-restrictive. And what it means is that, for example, here is like, it says that she showed the leg which or that was injured, right? So which one is the right one? Which one are you supposed to use? How many dates? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4. How many want to say which? Okay, and there are a lot of people who don't want to say anything. So there's only two choices: either you are with which or with that, right? And the people who are not really saying either is not using their brain, because your brain tell you something, right? And there's nothing wrong, it can be either which or that. Is two choices, right? I just want to clarify the difference, right? They both can be used, right? But there's a better choice for one than the other. Okay, so again, how many dead? Okay, there are a lot more dead now, and which, the rest of which basically, right? Okay, now, as I said, it has to be, it is restrictive, is restrictive, right? So is that she showed the leg, right? We have to use that here because it's very specific, that leg, right? Okay, so she showed the leg that was injured. Okay, so the leg that was injured, she has to leg, right? Okay, here is like, the shirt was my favorite, the shirt was my favorite color. Okay, you have a shirt, and this your this says the shirt, the shirt was of my favorite color, right? That or which? Wow, anybody for that? Okay, we have to use which here, right? Okay, so which is blue color, right? Okay, now the thing, the way you can make distinction is that if you remove this which, right, you still have the information or thought, right? So the color was the shirt was my favorite color, okay, right? And there's just, oh, by the way, my favorite color is blue, right? So this is just the extra information, right? So you use which when you want to provide extra information. You don't have to provide that information, but when you provide some extra information, you use which, right? And you use that when it has to be connected with some specific occurrence or a specific person, right? Okay. The magazine I read at lunch, okay, which or that had pictures of goat, reminded me to grab goat cheese, right? Which or that? Okay, so he says, let's read it again, right? The magazine I read at lunch, which had pictures of goat, right? Reminded me to grab goat cheese, right? So, rule, I say, if you take that out, if there is extra information, if you take that out, right, you should still have the right meaning. So let's take it out. He said the magazine I read at lunch reminded me to grab goat cheese. Okay, still makes sense, right? So it means we have to use a which here, right? So which is just the extra information, right? Okay, the magazine I read at lunch, which had pictures of goat, right, reminded me to grab goat cheese, right? Okay, now a map would have made it easier to get to the city that was far away, right? So we're talking about the specific cities, so we have to use that. Okay, so some of these, okay. Okay, let's go. So you understand some of that, right? The introduction, some how to put things together, right? Okay. Yes. What is the difference between? What was the first? Introduction and literature review. Well, literature review, there are sometimes people often use both, one place or the other place, right? You can also say the literature review or for the introduction, right? Okay. Now, literature review is just provide what, which is kind of, not really an appropriate thing, because introduction is more, to use the term introduction is more appropriate because introducing something, right? Literature review is just you go and then review the literature, okay, and then you report what is in the literature, right? Which is just kind of putting all the information together. Okay, introduction is more like not only you doing the literature review, right, but you're making a story, right? So the literature review can be just is like a form of data, collecting data together or collecting the information together. But if you want to have some kind of more thing which is more consistent and which also gives some kind of give you an opportunity for career thinking, that you can review the literature and present in a form that describes something, make a story, right? This is more like introduction, but often they are used, extensively. Okay, now the second thing is like materials and method, right? So we're going to review, what kind of things we need to have in the materials and method, right? Often it's also called experimental procedures. Some, in general it's called experimental procedure. In some places it's called materials and method, right? Okay. In the materials and method, what you have to do in the materials, you have to describe the source and complete name of chemicals or cell culture, animal, taxonomical information, right? So anything you obtain, you said that, I found this, material, I got this material, you have to provide the complete name of your cell line, you have to provide the name of the cell line and then their sources, right? Okay. For method, right? Now you have to arrange method in a logical order, right? What it means that when you describe your experimental section, you have to go in a logical order. So because and it follows how you're going to present your results, right? So for example, if you have you have screened the compound, okay, or maybe you synthesize the compound, then you screen the compound, for cytotoxicity, then you look for the molecular mechanism. Maybe you look for the expression of receptors or activation of certain enzymes, right? Okay, so you describe everything in the same order. So you describe how you synthesize the chemicals, right? Okay, then next would be how you screen the chemicals. What assays you use to measure the cytotoxicity, right? And what you did for measuring the Western blot or enzyme expression mechanism or enzyme activity, right? And usually people do it in that way, but sometimes you'll be surprised that people put down things in very illogical order. Like they have the cell culture, and then they describe how they synthesize the compound, and then they describe like how they actually did the Western blotting or look for the mechanism, and then they describe the cytotoxicity assay. So there is no sequence, right? So you have to have in the same sequence how you're going to describe your results. You have the same sequence to describe your material and method section. Okay, and then so when you describe the materials and method section, you have to provide a reference if the method is well understood, well described in the literature. Okay, something is already described, don't have to repeat again. We just said that this method or this procedure was done according to such and such, or this method, or we use this method as described by, put the name of the person, or as described by, give the reference, right? Or described previously by you and state, or you can just put your own references that as we described previously. So you analyze the cytotoxicity using MTTSA as described previously, right? So you don't have to describe the whole procedure, how you did the, you grow the cell in 96 cells plate, incubated for 12 hours, next day you treat it with different concentration, and then you incubated for another 24 hours. Then third day you remove the media, then treat the cells with the MTT, incubated for another 4 hours. You don't have to describe again and again the same thing. It's already described one time in your paper, you can always refer it back. Okay, so we did the MTT analysis as we described before, or as described previously, right? Or if you modify something, then you can just explain that we as described previously with this modification, or with slight modification, where we include this as a control, or we include as standard. So you just describe your only the modification you have done to the method, right? Any method which is new or less familiar, then you have to include the enough information that your study could be repeated, right? So when you write a new procedure, you have to actually read it and see if you have explained it enough that a new person can read it and repeat it easily, right? And often I've seen in the paper, people don't want to really tell because they don't want anybody else to repeat this experiment and do it, or they know something they found hard way, like they repeated the experiment 4 or 5 times to get the optimum conditions. Sometimes they don't want to tell because they don't want other people to, like, they want other people to suffer too and find out in hard way, like they have done it, right? Which is not really true. Once you find out, you want to make his life easy. For the people, the advantage is they can refer your paper, right? If you describe in detail, they can say, well, the procedure was done according to, they cite your paper, right? So you get a citation. So you describe in enough information, they can repeat it, right? But if they have to get your information and then they have to do trial and errors again, they're not going to refer your paper, right? They're going to then describe their own procedure, right? So you're losing one citation, okay? Now, when you describe a procedure, make sure that you describe, what what temperature you use, what pH you use, how long you incubate it, right? Should be in your procedure, right? And after that, describing what the procedure, you have to have somewhere say that, how the data was recorded, right? And then always include the appropriate control. Sometimes people don't mention what control they use, what was their normal cell line, or what was their was control, right? And try to use the passive voice. Don't say I did this, or no, I took a 96 cells plate, and then next day I added 10,000 cells in the well, and then I incubated the cells in the incubator, and then after 2 days I then added WST diet. Don't say too many times. 1 or 2 times is okay, but to use the passive voice. Okay, the cells were incubated in 90 cells plate and then treated with, treated with the whatever reagent or chemical you're using for 24 hours in a humidified incubator, and then they were treated with MTT in order to determine the cytotoxicity, right? So avoid using the first form that I did this, or we did this, right? Okay. And then anything which is not really necessary, you don't have to really present, right? So in the first draft, you can put whatever you think, and then you have to go back again, and then you have to polish, right? Never think that you write the first draft and it's all complete. Okay, it's never, first draft is like, you're trying to put things together, you try to make a story, you try to put all your, whatever you're, writing a paper or thesis, right? But you have to always go back and polish it and see, if you have, make the paragraph right, sentences right, verb use, if there are extra thing, you have to remove it and make it more concise. Okay. Okay. So for example, here there's some examples. Okay. So after considering a variety of techniques for determining sugar content of nectar, I decided to use the method developed by Johnson in 2004 because it seems straightforward and easy to follow, especially for someone with a poor mathematical background, right? Okay, so there's a procedure that somebody described, but there are a lot of information here which is not really necessary, right? Okay, let's figure out what is not necessary, right? After considering a variety of techniques for determining sugar content of nectar, right? What we have to say here, it is important to tell that, you consider so many techniques, right? It's not really important, that you have to tell that, you consider so many techniques, right? The only thing you determine is the, sugar content of the nectar, right? I decided to use method developed by Johnson. Okay. So you determine the sugar using a method developed by Johnson, right? Okay, you don't have to say that I decided. It's obviously, obvious that you use it, so of course you decided, right? Because it seems straightforward, it's again unnecessary, right? And easy to follow, especially for someone with a poor mathematical background, right? So this is all unnecessary. So basically, you have to make it short and concise. We said I use Johnson's 2004 method to measure the sugar content of nectar. Okay, there's the information you want to provide. Again, it's your experimental section. The experimental section, you're going to say how you did that procedure. And it's, this sentence exactly gives the same message that I use this method to measure the sugar content of nectar. And the rest of the information is really, description is really not necessary. Okay. Now, there's also, people, when they write in a way which kind of vague. You cannot repeat. Okay, for example, in this case, I observed some monkeys in a large outdoor enclosure and other in small individual indoor cages, right? Now, what's wrong here? Can you read this and repeat this experiment? How many people think that they can repeat this experiment? Well, nobody's saying that they can repeat this experiment. So it means there's something wrong with this procedure, right? Okay, let's find out what is wrong. Okay, anybody can identify what is wrong? Why you cannot repeat it? Huh? What is that? Okay. 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 Yeah, that's possible. Anybody else? Exactly right. First thing is that, it says you take monkeys. Now, the first thing would be how many monkeys you're going to take, right? Can you repeat this experiment without knowing the monkeys, number of monkeys, right? Okay. So it says, I observed some monkeys in large outdoor enclosure, right? Okay. And others in small. Okay. Now, so for example, you learn the information. Okay, they use 10 monkeys. Okay. Next step would be to put them inside and outside, right? Okay, so can you figure out how many to put outside and how many to put inside? No, okay. And then it says in a large outdoor enclosure. I mean, is there any information how large it is, right? And same as individual indoor cages. Again, you don't know how small were the cages, right? So there is not enough detail, right? If you want to repeat this experiment, it's going to be really difficult. So the way you provide is that, okay, I observed 13 monkeys, okay? So people know that, okay, you use 13 monkeys in an outdoor enclosure, and you providing this, like, size, right? 10 by 8 by 12, okay? So everybody knows now, they get the idea that how big is the outside enclosure. And 12 others. So now you know that you have 30 monkeys outside and 12 monkeys in the indoor cages. And then you have this size of the cages here, 1 by 2 by 1, right? So now you know that, now you get the, you can envision yourself, okay, it's by 1 feet, by 2 feet, by 1 feet. So these were the small cages, right? Which were indoor. On the outdoor enclosure was like big, okay, 10 by 8 by 12, right? So now, see, this sentence doesn't really change very long, right? It's still this, sentence, but by providing all this information, all the details, okay, you are helping somebody to repeat the experiment, right? And then, so if you describe like this, right? So the next person is going to do, what is going to do? You say that I perform this experiment as described, right? The other person does not have to give all this information. Okay, because they can say, well, we performed this experiment as described by such. So the advantage is, we describing in detail, you get a citation, right? Reported that your paper has been seen or cited by that many people, right? Okay, whereas if some person has to do it, if they got the information, okay, you did the experiment, okay, you have the monkeys, so you're observing the difference between like behavior of monkeys where they're outside and inside, right? But if they have to figure out how many monkeys to use and how many, outdoor enclosure they have to make, and how many inside enclosure they have to make, if they have to do everything by themselves, you are giving them information, but then they have to work themselves. They're not going to cite your name or refer your paper, right? So they're going to provide, and the other people are going to use their citation, right? So again, when you write, you have to provide sufficient information that people can repeat the experiment, right? Okay, here, several pits were dug at each for a site, and soil samples were collected from 3 different depths in each pit. Okay, now again, I already says the vague sentence, right? So you don't have to say that there's something wrong with it. There's something wrong with this sentence, right? Or with this procedure. Let's see if you can identify. So, okay, several pits were dug at each for a site. Okay, so what's wrong here? Now you're getting expert, right? Okay. All right, so several pits, right? So you don't know how many pits, right? Okay, were dug at each for a site. Okay, so do you know how many sites? No, right? So there's another problem here, right? So like, several pits were dug at each for a site, and soil samples were collected from 3 different depths in each pit. Okay, anything else wrong with this sentence? Depth size, right? You don't know how deep they get, right? So 3 depths, right? It's going to be like 1 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch, right? Or it can be 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, or it can be 1 feet, 3 feet, and 10 feet, right? You have no idea, how deep you have to go to get your samples, right? So again, that kind of thing, when you write, you have to think about whether you provided that information, if somebody can repeat your experiment. So just by saying that, 4 randomly located pits were dug at each for a site, right? Now you know that there are 4 sites, right? Okay, and soil samples were collected from 3 depths at each, 0 to 5 centimeter, 6 to 10 centimeter, and 12 to 17 centimeter, right? Now it's clear that, okay, you have like, you dug the pits, 4 different forest sites, and then and you got the sample at 3 different depths, right? Okay. Now, root nodule tissue was stained with a number of histological reagents, right? Okay. I'm sure now everybody can figure out what's wrong with here. You're probably expert by now. Okay, root nodule tissue with the number of histological reagents. What's wrong here? Okay. Okay, root nodule tissue was stand with, you have to provide like toluidine, blue, shift base, and aceto or C, right? Now you are providing detail that these are the histological reagent you use, right? Okay, and I swear, a lot of people like, just write like this, a number of histological technique without giving the information. So from this information, the other person who's reading has no clue, right? What histochemical reagents, histochemical reagent they use, right? Okay. So this again, just to give you some examples that you need to consider when you write the materials and method, right? Now, every nest was checked frequently for sign of predation. What's wrong here? How many nests? Okay. Was checked frequently, right? For sign of, yeah. Okay. So what check frequently, you don't know how many frequently, right? Once a month, once a day, once an hour, right? A sign of predation, right? What kind of signs, right? Okay. So every nest was checked twice daily, right? At 8 to 16, right? Now you know that what time you are using, right? A sign of predation on egg or nesting, right? So now it's by this it is more clear, right? Somebody can repeat this experiment. Okay. So you got some kind of understanding when you write materials method, right? Now there are certain other things you need to consider, right? In all materials method, we always use no numbers, right? Like 12 out of 425 eggs were cracked at the start of the first experiment, right? So what you need to do is that never start a sentence with a number, numerical number, right? Always spell it out, right? So 24 out of 402. There's nothing wrong in the sentence. It's just that when you write, do not start a sentence with a number. Okay, always spell out the number. Okay. Same thing here again, like 6-mercaptopurine was used to inhibit mitosis, right? What's wrong here is the sentence start from with a number, right? So why you need to say you have to modify, rephrase, like mitosis was inhibited by 6-mercaptopurine, right? So you just rearrange, say in a different way that you can avoid using, starting a sentence with a number. Okay. Or you can say I use 6-mercaptopurine to inhibit mitosis, right? Okay. Here I conducted 10-15 minutes observation session. Okay, what's wrong here? Okay, so you have to basically spell it out. I conducted 10-15 minutes because here is does not really if this it look like maybe you forgot a space here is maybe 1015 or it's between 10 to 15, so it's like confusing. So just make it clear. I conducted 10-15 minutes observation. Okay, now I conducted 10 observation session, each lasting 15 minutes, right? So again, it's clear at least what you have done. Okay, so these are all like materials and methods section, what you need to consider, right? Then whenever you do your research, you get the data, right? So you have to always perform some kind of statistical analysis, right? It's very important. You cannot really do these days without any statistics, right? You do a t-test and all that, right? So if you don't, a lot of people, they have their own, they are expert just doing simple t-test, and these days there are all kinds of software which you can use. You don't really have to have a statistician, but you probably need a statistician if there's a complex kind of analysis, right? So if you're not sure, talk to a statistician, describe how the data was collected, right? Use appropriate test, and then like t-test, ANOVA, post hoc correction, whatever you did, you have to really explain. So this is always a separate section which is, statistical analysis. Right. Now we come on results section, right? Now, I tell you about more than 80%, people, what they do when they write result, they describe the method again. They have described the method in the method. We have a section which is called materials and method or experimental section. There's a purpose of the section that you describe materials and method there, right? But then people again go back again, and then they repeat the whole thing that, okay, the cells were treated with this, and then incubated. After 24 hours, we made the observation, and we found, all this, right? There is I've seen so many times that first 3-4 sentence is the same, the method is repeated again. The thing that people will forget what you did a few minutes ago. No, if they want to know, they can go back and look in the materials and methods section, right? So you avoid repeating the methods again, right? Okay, and then you have to summarize your data and illustrate your data. So it's like, and we give you some example, but I mean summarizing the data. So whatever you do is you have to present is that that it makes some sense, right? For example, like when you're saying that you treated cells with something and you find an increased activity, right? Okay, find increased activity, but then this increase doesn't really tell you how much is increased, right? Okay, this is double or triple, or it's 10% increase, or it's 20% increase. So you have to have really more specific. Say increase by 25%. So there's no doubt people know that it's increased by 25%. But if it says activity is increased by treating these cells with such compound, it means different people will get different idea, right? This one is increased, but some people think maybe it increased 100%. Some it may be 50%, 10%, whatever, or 2% is increased 2%, but then this really then people know, well, 2% increase is nothing, right? So you have to be basically more specific. Okay, you need to summarize all major findings with specific reference to your data. Okay, and then you refer every figure and table in the text in an orderly fashion, right? So what you have done first, you have to put the same order. Like if you are describing the figure 1, then figure 2, figure 3, and figure 4, and you're not going to believe sometimes people they describe figure 1, and then they start describing figure number 5, and then they come back in figure number 2, and then they describe figure number 3, which is not really, if that's the case, then you relabel the figure 5 as figure 2. Okay, if you think it's essential that after figure 1 you have to describe the figure 5, then don't put that figure as figure number 5, put as figure number 2. So it's go figure number 1, figure number 2, figure number 3, figure number 4. So it has to be everything goes in an order, right? And then always I say you provide a qualitative measurement, significant difference, trend, and correlation, right? So whenever you are describing your results, right, consider these things. First thing is qualitative measurement. As I said, you have to really provide the qualitative number, right? It's increased by 2-fold, 1-fold, 25%, 2%, whatever, right? And then you have to say whether it was significant or not, right? So you have said, well, this drug significantly decreased the effect of such compound by 25%, right? Okay. Now you know that this effect is significant. A 25% decrease is a significant difference. And whenever you're saying significant, then you have to provide a p-value, right? Always. So it says significant. So this drug significantly, then in brackets p is less than 0.5, significantly decrease the effect of this compound on this cell line, right? Okay. So you have to provide a significant difference. Or sometimes you have using the multiple things, then you have to, so what is the trend? Okay. So maybe you're doing an experiment. It's happening often that you're doing the experiment, you're seeing that whatever compound you're using, they're just increasing with the dose dependent way, but this difference is not really significant, right? Every time you repeat, it decreases, but it's not significantly different. It doesn't mean that it's not important, right? Because significant difference will tell you that, okay, the difference is very significant, but you can, in that case, you can say, well, there's a trend that, when you increase the concentration, the the effect is goes increases or decreases. So there's a trend which they said, well, okay, it is consistent that you see the observation is it has certain kind of trend. So this are describe in your result, right? Or correlation. Then you can describe that how your data is correlated. If you have two different parameters, then you say how these two parameters are correlated, right? So there's all kind of things you have to provide. Don't discuss your results here. Just provide, discuss the data only. That okay, it's got 25% increase, decrease. Why it is increased or why it is decreased? There's a discussion section, right? That's what you describe in the discussion. Well, it increased because receptor was able to bind, or the agonist was able to bind to the receptor, which has made some changes, and that has or which has activated this pathway, which we found that there's increased phosphorylation of this protein, indicating that this proteins got activated. Just all the things which we need to describe in the discussion section, right? Don't start describing the thing that here that well there was 25% increase because the agonist binded the receptor, right? No, just say well 25% increase. That's all. Right? So just describe the data on result only in result section, and then you describe things in the discussion section, right? Okay. That's what I just said, right? Now report data only, right? Do not interpret your data in the result section, right? Do it in the discussion section, right? Okay. And also do not draw conclusion. And I've seen people, they have like the whole section is like they're describing materials method, they have the result, and then they're also discussing and then also concluding at the same time, right? So you have specific sections, right? You have a result section, you have discussion section, and then conclusion. So each section you have to put appropriate descriptions, right? Okay. Common mistake. People try to present some raw data, right? Okay, raw data means like they say, well, the concentration is like there were 350 cells before the start of experiment. When we treated the cell, there were 500 cells, right? Because this is really you're not analyzing your data. You have to really say that how much is increased or how much is decreased. So you're not trying to you have the raw data, but you have to analyze it in a way that there's increase or decrease or whatever the effect is. You have to analyze it. Redundancy, right? You repeat the same thing again and again. And people always do. They repeat the same thing again and again. Again, they put the discussion and interpretation of data in the result section, right? Sometimes they have the data, but there's no figure or table, right? And then they start describing. If you don't have data, then discuss the data in the discussion section. If you're describing somebody else's data, then discuss in the discussion section. And again, do not report materials and method back in the result section. Okay. So any question in the results? Yes. No, you can refer stable in the results section, right? That's where it is. You have to put the results section, but you don't interpret your data, right? You have the data, then you have to analyze it. You say what's exactly happening, right? Okay, you have 2, 3, 4 compounds. You have different IC50, right? You describe that you use 4 compounds. Compound has the IC50 of this one, and their compound has IC50 of this, and then the compound has IC50 of this one, right? Okay, but then you don't say the same that okay, because the compound 4 has low IC50, then this compound is potent, right? That's you have to put in the discussion area, right? So the result section, you just have only the results, increase, decrease. Okay, why it happened, then you describe. Okay, did I answer your question? Okay. Any other? So it's pretty, the materials and methods section is the easiest section to write because you already know what you've done. You have your notes book. You have to write only the few things you have to pay attention. It's the very easy thing to write. Make sure you describe in detail. Make sure that following certain rules, not to write, starting a sentence from numeric numbers and that kind of things. Okay, now discussion. In the discussion, this is the section where you interpret your result, right? Okay, and you have to do it in a logical order. First thing first, you don't just jump around, move around, then you discuss, and then you moved here, come back here, and then move back again. It's like a haphazard, right? It really does not. You have to make a story. So if you have to do in that way, then you modify your result section and put the things in a logical order, which follow the same logical order in the discussion, right? Okay, so you think that the table 1, we're going to discuss the table 1 and then table 5. Then then what you do is that you put your table 5 as table 2, so that you can describe everything in a sequence. So always very important to have the materials method in the same sequence, result to describe in the same sequence, and when you discuss, you also discuss everything in the same sequence. Sometimes it's not it's not the hard and fast rule that you have to do this, but it's just to make more sense, right? Sometimes it happens that you have to describe one thing and then you have to connect this with the last thing, right? That can be done, but in most cases you have to have everything in a logical order, right? Okay, and then what experiment you did, you describe it, then you have to really figure out what is the implication of this data, what you found, what exactly it means, how it can help others. Okay, what is going on here? So you provide the explanation of data, right? Okay, so then you compare your data with other similar studies. So you did an experiment, you got some data, you made the observation, right? So then you have to really discuss that, okay, we found this, and actually our data is consistent with the other people who also found this, and that, right? Okay, so you try to see, or you can, it's a novel observation. You say, well, we found this, and we found that again, no one has ever reported, this is fake, so this is a novel. So you describe your data, right? Or there may be things that, you found something and everybody else is saying something different, right? So you found, that, okay, insulin is, affecting, this thing. You found that, okay, there's a unique effect, but everybody is saying that it does not happen, right? Then you have to explain. You say, well, you found this, and then, but in literature or this other studies are shown, and such is shown as this, and such is on this, and then all that. And then you explain why there are differences. Okay, because the cell line we're using is their neuronal cell. Other people have seen this effect, but they use liver cells, right? So there may be a difference, different tissues may respond differently. And this could be the different, tissues may be expressing different receptor or different number of receptor. And you have to think, that's where your critical thinking comes, right? So the discussion section is the one which really tells somebody that, how critically you are thinking. You are thinking at all, you're not thinking at all, or you are just, a person which is saying, hey, me too. If somebody has done that thing, I have done too, so me too, which really decreases the novelty of your work, But if you, examine your data, you try to see that, like other people have done, what are the similarities, what are the differences, and you describe that, okay, well, you found this, but other people have found this, and this is because the other people have used this one, and this, we have used this one, right? So there's always an explanation. Okay, so you go over this, okay, explain the different and possible explanation, support your interpretation with evidence, right? Okay, so you said that, that, okay, other people has found this, but we have really found this, right? Okay, and these are the differences, but this kind of things have been shown previously in other models or in these models, or that's what happens. So you provide some kind of evidence that, hey, I'm not crazy, I'm doing this, there's nothing wrong. I did the perfect experiment. I repeated 6 times, and every time I had the same results. So I'm not wrong, right? I'm getting some, result different, but there's an explanation because it was done in different condition and all that. And similar kind of things has been reported in other models too. Also, they have not reported in the same model. So it is possible that that may have occurred, right? So you have to really go back and then you describe everything. You think about it and describe, right? Other thing is the negative results, right? Not every result is you need to have a positive result. Like people think that you have to find an effect. You're looking for a drug. It has to be an anti-cancer drug, right? You're looking for trying to find. Well, what about if it's not active, right? There's also information so that people don't use this, or they don't work on that drug again. So you can say, well, okay, we did this. Negative data is not working, right? It has no effect. So you have to report it, right? So this is also information. Other people then will use that compound to repeat the similar kind of things, right? They probably use something different, right? So negative data has importance too. It's not that you can just ignore that my data is negative, then either I don't have to show it or or don't work on it, right? Still you can work on it, and negative, is that result is result, right? Now, in the discussion section, especially also in the result section, always use the past tense, right? Because there's something you have already done, right? So use the past tense in the finding and then discuss, as you have already done, right? The other thing is that, not everything is perfect, right? You did the experiment, you think about it, you design the experiment, you do the experiment, and then you provide interpretation, right? But there's always limitation to every study, right? So when you have done your discussion, at least in the last paragraph, you provide that what are the limitations. And some of the limitation is like, for example, like you say, like this study has several limitations. Okay, there's nothing wrong. Everybody has a limitation. As I said, there's no perfect experiment, right? So you don't have to say that, oh, the experiment I have done is perfect, right? That's not possible. They're always like, you cannot generally apply the same knowledge to everything, right? So there may be differences. Like, okay, the experiment was performed under an in vivo condition, right? Which does not entirely represent the microenvironment of the brain tissue. Okay, so you're admitting, okay, I found the result, okay, but hey, there's a limitation. Like, hey, this may be happening outside in these cells, but in the intact brain, it may be different, right? Okay, therefore, doses and efficacy of DHA and lomustine for glioblastoma cell line may be different from those tumors growing in the brain. There's an error here. This should not be forwarded. Okay, now you're saying that, okay, the tumor growing in the brain, if you treat them with this drug, it may affect differently rather than those cells when you're treating them in vitro condition, right? Okay, so we tested the concept of improving lomustine efficacy by combining it with DHA in a few represented glioblastoma cell lines. Our finding may not be applicable to all glioblastoma. We know that glioblastoma, there are multiple types, right? You use one kind of cell, same as often people study like here, breast cancer, they use breast cancer cell line. And often their interpretation is that, okay, we found the anti-cancer drug and it can cause the, breast cancer. I mean, that's not possible. There's so many different kind of breast cancer. There are so many different kind of breast, cancer cell lines. So you have to provide that, okay, we did this experiment on breast cancer cell line, which are ER positive or HER2 negative, right? However, this is only one cell line. There are other cell lines which are also ER positive, ER negative. And because every cell line has different genes, or different genes are expressed, or they have different molecular pathways are expressed for their proliferation, it is possible that we have blocked one or two pathways, but then other cell lines may have different mechanism for cell proliferation, and this may not work on the other cell line, right? So you provide some kind of a limitation, right? Okay, furthermore, DHA may or may not improve efficacy of other chemotherapy drugs which are currently being used. To address this limitation, in vivo studies in orthotropic xenograft model of glioblastoma are required, using combination of different chemotherapeutic drugs along with DHA. These in vivo studies are the next step in our research, right? So we provide explanation. Okay, we did the experiment. That's what we know. But there are limitations. You just cannot say that, there's a final thing and you have discovered the cure of cancer, right? Okay. So you describe the limitation, right? Okay. Our investigation demonstrated a highly effective combination therapy in an in vivo glioblastoma cell model, right? DHA and lomustine combination potently inhibited cancer growth and induced apoptosis and necrosis, right? Future studies should address the mechanism by which this combination imparts this possible synergistic effect. It is quite possible that DHA sensitize the glioblastoma cell to the lomostin induced apoptotic effect. So it's just like, you have to provide some kind of conclusion at the end for your study, right? So you got a result, discussion, invitation, and then you conclude, right? Okay. So what time is it? Okay, we'll go a little bit more. Okay. And then like there's some of these things, like, people make mistakes, like here, the data in table 1 are very consistent with the Chiva's model, right? So basically what's wrong here is the data in table are consistent. There's no such word like very consistent. Either it's consistent or not consistent, right? So saying very consistent doesn't really make sense, right? Okay, male guarding eggs are quite aggressive toward juvenile and females, right? Okay, you don't have to use word quiet, right? Aggressive is aggressive, right? Because you say quiet, it doesn't really means how quiet. Okay, aggressive. They're too aggressive, less aggressive. I mean, they are aggressive, right? So male guarding eggs are aggressive towards. Okay. Common mistake what we do in the results section is that, sorry, the discussion section is that people describe results again, right? And often they make very, very broad statement, right? Or like, I have seen so many places that, okay, we found, this compound inhibited cancer growth. So, we found the cure of cancer, right? It's not, you said it's may possible, right? You always, give like, it's not, that this drug is effective. It is possible that this drug has some, effects on, that can produce kind of cancer, right? Okay, don't be 100% sure that, don't say that, oh no, we found this drug and it's going to cure the cancer, right? Don't make the broad statement. Or people incorrectly discussing inconclusive results. I mean, the results showing there is no like conclusive the data, but then they are making it like, giving the impression that they definitely have some kind of, if it's inconclusive, just say that data is not conclusive. In 3 experiments, we found the, stimulation. In 2 experiments, we did not find this, any effect. And then it's possible that cell may be a different physiological state or metabolic state, and then, the metabolic state they are maybe affecting the effect of this drug, right? So you provide some kind of explanation, right? Okay, ambiguous data source, like, they get the data, but they don't say that where they got the data. Or the missing information is always like, that the information is not there, how they come to that conclusion, right? So these are some of the common mistakes. Now the next part in the paper is the acknowledgement, right? Okay, you should always thank to people who assist in the study, right, or in manuscript preparation. Special reagent you obtain, cell line somebody gave it to you, you should acknowledge them. Any money you got from anybody, if you're on a scholarship, you should acknowledge that the work was done, or such and such person was awarded a scholarship to carry out this work, right? Typical example, like, here the work was supported from a grant, and you always put down the grant number to RAS. You don't have to say name. Usually people figure out who is RAS from the author list. Who gave the grant? From the National Cancer Institute. You provide the address. Author would like to express their thanks to Ms. Elaine Bermelin for help in the preparation of the manuscript, right? So for a person who typed the manuscript or help you or revise it, then you have to thank that person. Mr. Samuel Riguay for help in best mount preparation, Mr. Saji Jaffrey for help with the heat map plot, and Mr. Kevin Headley from DSM for the generous donation of DHCO for this research, right? So you acknowledge anybody. It's actually helpful. People feel, they, when they see their name, they help you a little bit, they're willing to help you again, right? But if somebody help you and then you ignore that, oh, I don't want to make this person popular, people, put his name, why should I put this name, and become like, very selfish. Somebody give you some reagent, always acknowledge them, then person will be again will be helpful to you. But if you ignore, next time the person is not going to help you. Say, well, why should I help this person? I don't get it. Not even put my name in the acknowledgement. Sometimes people help and they expect that you put their name on the paper, right? But if their contribution is minimum, then you just acknowledgement. So at least they have some kind of acknowledgement. Okay. The other thing, your conflict of interest. It's like, it's really important these days that, you provide this information. Because what happens, some of the research is funded through different pharmaceutical companies. So you have to disclose that, okay, so people can understand, oh, okay, you're using this chemical, it is from the same company. So, there may be a bias, right? So you just said that author declared no conflict of interest if there's none, or because interpretation, conclusion are influenced by commercial interest. If company is giving you some money to study their drug, of course you're going to find something good for their drugs, right? It's a natural human thing that otherwise next time they're not going to give me any money. So you do that kind of thing, but you disclose it, right? So like conflict of interest, like the Zaloga and Mr. Pavlina were employees of Baxter. None of the other authors declare any conflict of interest. So you know that two authors they belong to Baxter, and Baxter provided this money, right? So at least they know that, okay, this research is supported, and it's not necessarily that they have influenced on the data. It's just that you have to just declare it, right? You always declare the author's contribution, like who designed the study, who worked on the different experiment, who performed the data analysis, who help in the interpretation, who help you in the preparation of manuscript, right? Something like RS planned the study, supervised the experiment, analyzed data, and wrote the manuscript. Cage participated in designing the experiment and analyzed tumor tissue samples. CW performed in vitro study for tumor induction. J perform experiment for microarray. You don't have to give the full name. You can, but usually people use just the their initials, and then they can find out the names and from the list, right? So everybody who did whatever, you have to provide their contribution. Okay, and then references, like in references, you have to follow the journal's guideline. Okay, and then you have to have reference completeness. I've seen people like author's name and the title is missing, and that is required. Or sometimes their first page, like you probably have seen there's a volume number, first page, last page, year of publication, and sometimes people say that it's a volume and the first page, the last page is missing. Sometimes air is missing, so they don't really go carefully. But these days, because we have programs like EndNotes, how many people are familiar with EndNotes? Okay, so people use references, the manager software, which actually almost like no error, because the program itself pull out all the information and put it together for you. So I would encourage always use your program. Okay, learn how to do the EndNotes, or there are other like reference manager there is in the program, so which will help you to put your references together. So the thing is that if next time you have to submit the same paper to another journal because your paper is not accepted or was not accepted, then it takes only one click and then references are reformatted to the style of the new journal, right? If you do it manually, then it's, you have to then again go back to your Word file and change it manually, which can take more time and introduce more errors, right? And then use EndNotes, right? Okay, check the order of references in the text. Okay, very important. Like in the text, it should be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It should flow the same number, right? Believe it or not, people have done reference number 1, reference 19, 32, 3, 4, 5, right? It doesn't make sense, well, there's nothing wrong, but it doesn't really look like you look like you're so lazy that you cannot really organize your references properly. You just want to put it together, and then okay, you find out reference number 13 is this one and 49 is this one. It has to be, you have to go back, reference 1, and after that you have to put reference 39. Then you change to reference 39 to reference 2, right? Make it position so it's flow all different 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? In the same sequence. Okay. You want, well, how much we have tables? We can stop here, right? Okay, we can start from
maybe tomorrow. Okay, so we'll go some of this stuff tomorrow, and then it's almost like how to put the table and figures together, which is not very much. But then we will go some exercises, right? That some of the example, some of the words we have to use, and try to make distinction what we supposed to use and what we supposed not to use, and when we have to use, right? And then we will go some punctuation, right? Okay. So I stop here, and I see you tomorrow, same time, 1:30. Okay. Any question? So I hope you pay attention to this, because how many people are going to write their thesis soon? Okay, so that would be really beneficial to you guys, because things are fresh, right? How many just started their PhDs or MPhil? New. So there are a lot of new people, right? Okay, so the thing is that this for you is really important that you start practicing, paying attention to this writing style, and then start organizing things in the same way, right? I've seen, I have done this workshop many times, and the people who have taken like this course or workshop some time ago, then they forget everything by the time they write their thesis, right? And they make the same mistakes, right? That are, which I have gone through, and I know that I have explained that there's no reason to ignore what have you learned, right? Because otherwise it shows that you have not really learned anything, right? So the thing is that, but the thing people forget. I mean, it's not that you are purposely ignoring something; it's just you forget. So the thing is, especially people who started their research recently, then you have to start practicing some of these things, right? Because when you practice more, by the time when you write your thesis, you will do a better job. All right, so thank you very much. I stop here. So I'm going to stop the Zoom.
Check the questions.
Oh, there's questions. Sorry. Let me check. So I'm going just through the chat and see if there's any chat. Okay, we'll send you the handouts. Okay.
You can save the chat. You can save the questions and you can address these tomorrow before.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Right. Okay.
Our chat session.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, okay, I can set the chat.
Because there
Set
are
the
too
chat.
many other messages as well, so it might be.
Yeah, there are too many. It's hard to go over. So I'll set the chat. Okay.
And you will send it to us. And
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Turn it off. Zoom out.